Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be continuing our AAR for Venice. We left off in 1437, 100 years into the game, and with a kind of status where we're looking to kind of bulk up. We have a whole bunch of subjects, but in particular, we kind of consolidated the north of Italy, with a couple exceptions. There's like one guy around here, but it's mainly the Papal State and Naples and Sicily that remain in our way of gaining control of all of Italy. We are also trying to gain control of the New World and colonize, and we are also trying to gain control of markets in the Mediterranean. We're kind of pushing slightly aggressively on the expansion, mainly because Venice is actually pretty throttled on expansion and has a lot of deficits in that way because it's a merchant republic, but when it loses an expansion, it gains its ability to kind of push economies, and so we're going to be doing a bit of that and trying to see just how much we can push things. So to head things off, just as an opener, what we do is we kind of annexed this area at the end of last episode, but we didn't accept 1 million, and we have 1 million of millions, so we accept 1 million so that way we will get cores on these areas here. Also, just to provide a little bit of context, Modena is a province in here. Let's take a look and see if we can find Modena in here. And as a little bit of context, we're going to update a couple times on the amount of control we have in Modena, but we have 61 control and 44 proximity in Modena. In particular, we're going to get paved roads in the near future, and this represents a huge come up in terms of just how much economics we can leverage. We really do kind of hit the escape velocity regarding economics, I think, during this episode, and one thing to emphasize is that it is stuff like this that is going to be driving it. Now, coming back to kind of our map here, we also have and are in a new age, so new institutions are spawning. The printing press spawns in Paris, and so what we do is we get started on some trade routes importing from Paris. Straight away, we import dyes and silk, because France does produce some of it. It's not the best import for dyes and silks, but the important part is that as you are importing, you spread the institution, and we do want to get printing press a little bit faster, because printing press does have these paved roads, and so that is going to be an important thing for us. We spawned the New World in Venice because we had done some exploring and colonizing, or just getting ready to colonize in here. I don't think we maybe colonized one of the islands off the coast of Iberia, but I don't think that we did anything else other than that. And so if we have anything, it is going to be that. Although we do have Granada as a subject, which is going to be relevant pretty soon. We are trying to annex Mantua. And it is kind of a theme throughout this episode that we really start to run into problems by having too many subjects. And we will eventually discover that we should have researched March's last age, but we have too many subjects, and what happens is if you have a lot of subjects, their power relative to you is high, and their combined power relative to you for that one particular type of subject is high, you will get this huge loyalty malice. And Mantua is now too disloyal for us to annex, and we're trying to annex, so we do use the Diplo interaction support loyalists. But this takes 0.1 Diplo, and annexing them takes 0.1 Diplo, and that's 0.2 Diplo, and it's starting to be a strain on the resource that we are using to expand, which is we are subjugating and then we are annexing. But coming back to what we said earlier, all of our subjects are vassals. We're not allowed to take fiefdoms. There is a separate categorization for vassal and fiefdom for this penalty for having too many subjects of a particular type and their power level relative to theirs. So we could effectively have double the power level before it starts bothering us if we were able to have two subject types, but we don't at this point in time. So this is going to be a struggle throughout, and we are going to hit some enormous penalties to this. Just kind of a general rule of thumb, maybe there's 30 or 50 positive amount, or no, there's a little bit more than that, but you do have to be over 50 positive loyalty to be able to annex someone, and so often you kind of hover around 50 or 60, and so when you start running big penalties, you start needing to go out of your way to do a lot of stuff to make them loyal, like maintaining relations to absolute max, and doing these kinds of things, and so this is going to be a theme that kind of comes through. We do spread also quite a bit of the institution for printing press all throughout, and that is because you have this positive spread from could have spawned the institution. There's not a lot of institutions that have this, so usually you have to push things through trade, or at least this is what it feels like with the early scrum of institutions. But printing press is one of them. I forget the exact requirements of whether it is having a set number of scriptoriums, but I think it might be universities. We do have quite a few universities, and so we are going to be getting it pretty soon, but we still want to make it a little bit faster. Alright, so we have Morocco support a revolution against us. I'm not sure if it's this revolution, and it is a revolution specifically in our subject that we have kind of here in the north. And the kind of interactions we've played with this is there's some weird asymmetries that are created when someone supports your subject's revolution that are a little bit annoying, or when someone supports a revolution that targets you. And I'm not sure if it's this revolution where we do have the pain, but for example, there was a one where we were winning in war score, and we can't negotiate a peace against Morocco, and then our subject gives Morocco territory, and we can't enforce anything against Morocco ourselves, but they can enforce kind of asymmetrically on our subject during a revolution that is going against our subject, and so that's a little bit painful, but they do support a revolution against us. I think somehow we might have taken territory from them, because in a little bit we are going to sell a province and sell a location, and we sell a location, and it is this livestock here, or it might be these horses. We actually have the name of the location, so why don't we find it, and it is Ronda down here. So I do think that that was a fish province, or that wasn't a fish province because it's off the coast. Oh, it is. It's livestock. There we go. And we sell it for quite an expensive price. This is probably something that is a little overtuned. We sell it for 1,220 ducats at this point in the game. And I do think it just has to do a lot with the size of the economy of the person who's purchasing that drives how much they're willing to pay. And because there are really, really good resources in Granada here, who is a subject of our subject, that's why we initially just sold the location to them, because we can't give it to them because they're not our direct subject. But they are inside of our market that is doing a lot of trade, and stuff like the spices are getting exported to kind of richer markets, and this pulls up the price of spices, and so it allows us to be really profitable. But overall, Granada is very, very rich, and so they are going to be able to pay us more ducats, and this is quite a good amount for us. In fact, it's so much that we can come in and we can upgrade Udine. Now, Udine, we did focus on this a little bit, is this location up here, this wheat location. Namely, there's a whole bunch of marshes, just all throughout kind of this area. Here, let's see if we can find it. There's a whole bunch of marshes, and this is the one area that is a flatland with no marshland. It's flatland grassland, and so it has no impediments to being able to push control. So in particular, as we support kind of locations in here, they all come through this location of Udine. So if we upgrade it and we build a Panlock Canal, we will get a little bit more propagation there. So that's why we're focused in on Udine. We are giving up a wheat, and this is a little bit of a struggle. Earlier today, we were talking with another creator about how Italy is kind of an interesting environment when it comes to food, because the center of Italy is the least food dense kind of area in the entire world, I think. Or it's one where there's a lot of urbanization and the lack of food is very, very acutely noticed. Maybe that's a little bit of a better way of putting it. And in particular, this leaves Florence in a bad spot. And so Florence is kind of in a bad spot because you want to create a market here. It's actually a pretty good location for a market, all things considered, because you have a market here in Genoa, and a market down here in Naples. So it's kind of at the edge of all of these, so you don't have very good market access, you don't make a lot of money. The problem with this is, if you look at the food map mode, or the net food map mode, here is all negative, and then there's huge positives up here and here, generally speaking, on a per province basis. So the food map mode and food in general is calculated per province. So if we can find the provincial map mode, we can see that's not the provincial map mode. Although this is the area map mode. I think this is the provincial map mode. So a lot of these locations in the north are going to be having grain and livestock. And so the provinces are generally all net positive. So when you make your own market in Florence, and you just have this scrum, you only have basically a few little bits of wool, a couple livestocks, but generally speaking, you just don't have a lot of food. And so you will have to pay a whole lot of ducats of food. And this is a recent change in regards to balancing, is that food is an acutely felt thing now. You're kind of having to build up locations with a sensitivity to food. Rice, for example, is very nice because it gives 10 food per RGO, whereas wheat, livestock, the next best, give 8. I do believe potatoes and maize also give 8, but all the other kind of of foods are a little bit inferior. And so this is kind of an interesting consideration, I think, as it relates to that. But that aside, the next thing is that we also pass Naples up. And we pass Naples up in trade advantage within the Naples market. We have 0 locations in Naples, and part of this is actually Ragusa, which we have here. We control this market. This is starting to pull locations from Naples into Ragusa, and so this is diluting out the power of Naples within the Naples market. And so also because we have a bunch of maritime spread, and we have some of these overseas buildings that are really advantaged for us because we have a significant discount in them. As a merchant republic, we're building a lot of them, and these also allow us to patrol the seas. Because of all this stuff, kind of in concert, we gain control of this market despite having 0 locations. And this is really kind of a general objective for us, because when you control the market, you control all of the outgoing trade. When you control all of the outgoing trade, this means that you are gaining access to all the more profitable trades, and it really jumps up the amount of money that you're making quite a bit. We have 28.97 from maritime here, and we have 14.2 from overseas buildings, and this is against Naples, which has 42 from owned buildings and 1.2 from maritime. So important to emphasize, we have like 2/3, we barely have more than them, 2/3 of it is maritime. They have virtually no maritime, so they are underbuilding this kind of as a resource, especially considering this would actually be pretty good for Naples, good for pushing control down to here, although to be fair, the rest of kind of their country, they're not going to push control that direction, but they have a market that is on the sea zone, or that is right on the coast, so virtually all their trades go through this, and maritime also positively affects trade. One of the problems for us, though, in regards to the UI, is it's very opaque how it affects this, but my understanding is that much like it reduces the distance for proximity reasons, it also reduces the distance for trade reasons. I'm not 100% sure with this, I have to check. I'm going to leave feedback on this because it's really hard to discern through the UI, but Naples should probably be pushing this a little bit more than they are currently. The year gets to July 1438, and pike and shot is discovered in Alexandria. And this is something that's a little bit interesting. We don't have them kind of already prepped, but Alexandria actually spawns a lot of institutions, or tends to, especially if you're playing the Mamluks. And so this is quite a powerful thing, but they've spawned the military institution here. Some part is Ragusa in market, pulling Naples. All right, we already talked about that. It was a note. Ragusa is pulling Naples into their market here. Next up, we CB Isel, and I think, if I recall correctly, that was a little bit of a minor that got released from the Karamanids earlier, and we CB them with Sicilia's CB, which we had subjugated these guys for last episode, so that we could use CBs. We grab some territory here, and we feed the subject to Sicilia, and then we feed a couple of locations to Isel after subjugating them. At this point, we become the eco-hegemon, which is quite nice for us, just to kind of be there. I forget exactly what bonus there is. I think there's a couple of cabinet actions which aren't too good, but there's another bonus involved as well. So at this point, we start to have some input problems in our markets here. We start to have wood problems in Genoa, and we can resolve that easily building in our subjects. Again, we have a 90% discount in our subjects, and so we can build these lumber mills for 5 ducats, which is really, really nice, and this is a really strong advantage of the Merchant Republic. They're getting minus 50% in overseas locations, but Milan is our subject, so this play pattern of building in your subject before you annex them does feel really, really nice, and so we start to deal with that. We have a food problem in Ragusa, and unfortunately, Ragusa does not have that much food. There is some wheat. It's not under our control. I do think we expanded this out a little bit. This is Bosnia. I think they're our subject at this point in time, but our discount is only applied to buildings. It's not applied to RGOs, and so it's not very good for expanding out the food, and we specifically want to build food buildings, and that doesn't... I remember it being kind of a little bit difficult, but one of the features we kind of just overall have going on here now now is that we have multiple markets, right? We have this Venice market, we have this Genoa market, and we control big chunks of this market, so we're kind of responsible for making sure the stuff that's getting produced is in the right amounts, and that we're getting the right stuff. We kind of have the Ragusa market, but most of it's not us at this point in time, and so we build lumber mills, we build some sheep as best we can. Rural farms and irrigation are our focuses, but we are trying to build this stuff over building the RGOs because we don't have a discount on the RGOs. We get a Republican tech, which is a little bit interesting, which gives plus 10% morale. I do think this is kind of a little bit of a stronger tech, just wanted to point it out, because I do think, just generally speaking, the Republican tech tree is better than the monarchy one. In 1441, so we've been going a few years now, we do embrace the printing press, and so that is going to be good. And then we go for, in terms of tech, paved roads straight away, which is 3 or 4 techs down. I think it's 3, and then statecraft for an additional 10% crown power, or this is what we queue up at this point in time. We're going to discuss what techs we're queuing up, just kind of all throughout as soon as we queue them up, and just kind of briefly touch on them. But we do want that crown power because the amount of trade that we get scales with this, or the amount of income we get from trade scales with this. We have a ruler now with a bit of an interesting trait, trying to pay a little bit closer attention to this. It's Architectural Visionary, and it gives 0.002 dev, which is quite a lot of dev, because normally kind of what you get to just base is 0.005, so that's 40% more dev just from natural development, and kind of one of these traits we really like. There's a lot of traits that are really bad or really good. There's like one that gives minus 5% tax efficiency, and so we did want to make a little bit of a note about that. We do get called in against Aragon by Castile. We don't have a super good map here in this feedback because they don't go over the countries, but we don't really do a whole lot. We keeping them as an ally, we have to accept their calls, and so we accept their calls in here. Just to kind of do a little bit of a comparison, coming back to thinking of Naples versus Naples' control of their trade versus our control of their trade, we're making quite a lot more. And there's a bit of a confounding variable because we control the trade in like Venice and Genoa, say, and because we control the trade here, if we're using our trade capacity in Naples to import from either of these two, what's going to happen is we're going to gain priority here. So we have access to trades in Naples that Naples does not have access to by virtue of us controlling markets other than Naples. And that's because our cars are louder than Naples. Man, oh man, they're really loud. And so, but also, now we control the Nepalese exports. Whoever has the trade advantage in the market controls the outgoing goods. And so the differential here is that we have 40 trade capacity, and they have 37, but we're making 57 ducats in profit, and they're making 20 ducats in profit. And so we have a very similar trade capacity, but we're making nearly 3 times as much. And so just to kind of like emphasize a little bit, I think this might include our modifiers, but even including our modifiers, 3x is a lot. And so this is indicative of just how much more money we are getting than them. At this point, we have 21% crown power, and then we get this interaction that we do with the Papal States, which gives us minus 100 relations. You do have to use a little bit of your religious juice, I forget what it's called, to do this. It's 100, and it stays on your ruler till the end of time, but in exchange, you get 25 or 30%. Crown power, and so we go from 21% crown power to 24% crown power, so that's a 3% increase. That's 1/7 extra, so it's an additional, from our perspective, like 10% to trade income, and trade is a very big portion of our income here. We now deck on the Ottomans here, who the Ottomans have about half of Anatolia, and we're going to start busting them up quite a little bit. We use the prevent annexation CB. The Ottomans are annexing one of their subjects, which gives us access to this CB. It's not a very good CB, but we don't have to use any Diplo investment in a, a spy network or anything like this, and we don't have to use a parliament juice investment to be able to do it, and our point is to gain levers. And so we want to gain just like 1 or 2 territories in a couple of places that have releasables from the Ottomans, and then that way we will use them to deck on the Ottomans later, and so that way we don't have to invest as much. And so we get the Karenids and these guys down here, the Karenids and the Kandarids. Just a little bit of a snippet. I think it's 1 or 2 locations on each, and then we just get a bunch of gold. We do call it Castile. Castile helps out, and so that is going to be quite nice. Coming back to Italy, we increase ties to subjects in terms of a parliament, which is quite nice. It gives us a little bit of temporary loyalties, so that resolves any issues on a temporary basis while the parliament is going on, and then we also get a little bit of extra loyalty at the end. That's +5. I think if we yoink a province from someone, it gives us -10, and so I think we might yoink 1 or 2 provinces after completing this if it is successful, but we don't have a note in here for what exactly happens. We hit 1444, which is, kind of nice bookmark here. We are making 373 net income with the Parliament's extra taxes. 573 of our income is coming from tax. 256 is from trade. So normally we would be making about 60 to 70% of our tax income in trade on Venice. For most other countries, you make like 1/8 or something like this of your tax income as trade, but we have a bunch of advantages for it. And so we are making 256 from trade, 150 from Diplo, and it's important to note both trade and tax increase your expenses cost. So the value of trade and tax is actually significantly lower than the value of money you get from Diplo. And we're getting 150 from Diplo and 59 from minting. For our expenses, we are paying 232 for the cost of court. So this is a scaling expense. It scales with the size of your tax base. And so, relatively speaking, it also scales with the size of your trade. Relatively speaking, our trade is covering this, like, in its entirety, but if we increase our income by 10%, it's going to increase the cost of this by 10%. We're paying 68 ducats on Army and Navy. This is not scaling with our expenses. We're spending 232 on Diplo. And this is the one of very significant expenses for us to be subjugating all these people in all these directions and this type of stuff. We have to max invest in Diplo, and even then, we're still having loyalty issues. If we pulled it a lot slower, we would have a lot more net income with what we have, but we are, of course, getting that 150 from Diplo income, or income from our subjects. Actually, some of that Diplo income is from the war reps off of the Ottomans. We are spending 17 ducats on exploring and 3 on colonies. Colonies just seem kind of a little bit too cheap, but we probably should have colonized way more than we were doing, but it seemed gratuitous because the AI wasn't colonizing that aggressively, so we didn't feel the need to fight the AI over the colonies, and we kind of like having a lot of pops in our own locations. But as time goes on, the growth rate in the colonies is so much higher. You're giving up like 1 pop back at home to have like 3 to 5 pops overseas that are in a subject. I don't exactly know what the trade-off looks like, but you just invest and then you don't need to send any more people. We're also spending 108 ducats on buildings, so that is quite a sizable upkeep investment. Remember, we are 373 net, but about probably 200 of that maybe is from the extra taxes. And so if we were only 173 net, the cost of buildings represents a 40% decrease, in our net income most of the time. And so it is quite a bit of a painful thing. And so, but that's, and then finally we're spending 7 ducats on food. The food expense can get really out of control if you start running out of food, which makes now being sensitive to RGOs really, really important. But that's kind of the numbers in regards to where the economy looks right now. So at this point in time, we go on a bit of a building spree. Generally speaking, we try and do building sprees right after Parliament or not within 2 years of Parliament happening. And the reason for this is sometimes you get Parliament debates that give you an enormous amount of discount on buildings, like minus 20% building cost. And so if you have a bunch of buildings already in progress, or you have made the price of all your input goods expensive, when this comes around, it's kind of a big missed opportunity. And so so very often we're kind of every 5 years doing a building spree, or we're doing them in intervals of 5 years, and we do go on a bit of a building spree. In particular, there are these buildings called the rural smelters. You can build them in marshlands, and there's a couple other places that you can build them, but this is a rural building. It has 50 cost, and it uses coal as an input, and it creates an output of iron. Iron's a really important resource used in tools, just generally speaking really good, and we just blast all of them that are possible to be built. Just completely. We get a huge discount on the ones in our subjects, and keeping in mind, we don't own most of northern Italy. Most of it is our subject. All of this is either owned by us or our subject, but really just kind of this pocket is us here. And so we get a whole bunch of this added to the market. We also build charcoalers, which are going to use wood, in particular because it is a building, not an RGO. It cares about its inputs, so we build the charcoalers all up in here in the north, specifically in provinces that have lumber. That way we get a bit of a production bonus. We spam sheep. In particular, we try and spam sheep in areas where we are going to have overlap with rural farms and a food RGO. That way there's a whole bunch of multipliers applying to one type of thing. So we could have a wheat farm with a windmill that makes it produce extra food, and then a rural farm that makes it produce extra food, so this applies to the RGO, and then a sheep farm which produces extra food, and then an irrigation building. In particular, this location here, we have all of that going on. And the irrigation is a percentage multiplier for food, so you're stacking a whole bunch of modifiers. And we also build in our own urban centers. We have slowed down our building in the urban areas of our subjects, because that's going to give them more money for more armies. As they get more armies, they become more disloyal. So at this point, we really kind of have started pulling back our investment in subject buildings. We're still building in a bunch of rural stuff, or we're building resources that are inputs that aren't very getting a lot of output or getting a lot of money for. So lumber mills, we love them, we blast in them. They don't make a lot of money, but they keep the price of wood low. But other buildings that are just pure profit, we're waiting for us to be annexing them to be going for it. So Mantua, we might have built in Mantua because we're annexing them, but this is kind of, we're generally preferring to queue up a bunch of buildings right before it completes at this point in time. Via tech, we unlock administrative laws, and we choose dynastic administration. This one feels kind of okay. It's not that big a deal. It gives us a little bit of trend towards centralization. Trend towards centralization is kind of a little bit of a resource. Centralization being really good, it gives you crown power, plus 50% and minus 10% proximity. And so you want to make sure you always have a trend towards centralization, but there's a lot of good things that give you trends towards decentralization. And so the way we look at dynastic administration, it is giving us a resource which is trend towards centralization that we can spend elsewhere by giving trend towards decentralization while maintaining 100 centralization value. So we use Parliament CB, and we use it on Sicily, and we do this to isolate the Papal States. We don't want to deck on the Papal States because we don't want to get that massive relation penalty kind of moving forward, and we don't mind it on Sicily. And we just want to also isolate the Papal States. They have a whole bunch of allies, and so as part of this peace deal, we get them to get rid of all of their allies. Something that we really suffer through, like all throughout, is we could never annex Verona at any point in time, because we had minus 350 relations from declared wars that we had declared on them, and by the end of this episode, we have like minus 150 to 200 still. And so we really have to decay more of that out before we can annex them. And so that is a little bit of an uncomfortable feature, and we kind of, having learned from that, we don't want to stack a huge negative multiplier or negative relations hit on the Papal States, especially because they already have minus 100 from that Plactium Resium, or whatever it was called, that gives us crown power on our leader, but gives us a negative relations penalty onto them. And so we also release a Spoleto from them in here as a lever that we can use to deck on the Papal States, although I don't think we end up using it. We grab a couple territories here that had been ill-gotten gains from Sicily, and then we have we also get a little bit of Tuscia, or a little bit of this. Maybe we feed to a subject, something like this. But okay, speaking of Tuscan, we improve cultural opinion with Tuscan, so it's going to be cheaper for us to accept. This is because we have a big subject here. I forget who we do it with. We don't have it written down, but we can do this once every 50 years. We're trying to stay on top of doing it. We do it with Florence, actually. So Florence is the one that helps us out here. I do believe they're pretty big. Florence annexed quite a bit of territory before getting subjugated by us here. And we unlock paved roads, which we are very, very happy to be seeing. And so this is going to be really, really good. We do a little bit of a burger spam. I don't know what that means. I realize what that means now. Our burgers start spamming a bunch of roads because burgers are allowed to build roads if you give them a certain estate. It's a pretty good estate privilege. It gives you a trend towards centralization. You usually unlock it pretty early, but they start building a bunch of roads. We build a few critical roads, like from, let's take a look. We kind of have this map mode pretty well known here. We use... we build a road from like this salt inland here over a bunch of the urban areas that we have. So we want to get 1 or 2 really nice roads in when we unlock paved roads. But then we're going to let our burgers kind of fill in the blanks to some extent and not build a ton of roads ourselves. And by a ton, I mean paint the entire map one color where in the road map mode. Roads are really good, but we generally would like to get the critical roads down first when we unlock a new road tech, and then we start filling it in slowly / waiting for a improved paved roads, what is it, Parliament, at which point we will actually, if we have enough money, spend all of it. But this is an example of us going on a spending spree when Parliament hits. When we have improved paved roads, we get a 20% discount on roads, right? And we already have a 50% discount because of collapsed prices, so minus 70% is like a 40% discount on roads. So when you get this, you just road everywhere. You just cover the entire map with roads. But not having that, we just invest in the most critical roads. And I think we probably are also out of money at this point because we just went on a building spree, right? And so we get called in by Castile to fight Morocco, which we're thinking, hey, why fight for Castile when we can fight for ourselves? And so we just deck Morocco when we have the invite coming in. This bricks the invite, I guess, or this is what seems to have happened, and we're completely fine with that. We're just going to fight Morocco. We're going to take our own stuff, rather than getting a truce with Morocco, and not really being able to take anything because Castile did, or Castile giving us weird kind of pieces. This is something that's actually really annoying in some spots, is occasionally, and apparently this is an EU4 thing too, but whoever controls the war sometimes feeds you territory you don't even want. And you get the antagonism for that. So we want to make sure that we get what we want. And so that is going to be what we go for. We embrace the new world at this point in time. We do get faster research speed by having more embraced institutions. And so this is one reason. But also, I do think we finished that queue of tech we had going for. And so what we queue up right now is Rights of the Burghers, which is one of the very best techs in the age. And it unlocks the Rights of the Burghers law, and in particular what we're going to be going for is going to be curtail the burghers, which gives us 10% max tax from the burghers, which is really valuable. Next up is naval ambitions, and then overseas exploration. I think naval ambitions gives us an additional maritime spread, or helps us with or decreases the proximity cost of going through naval, which is kind of important for us here in Venice because it's going to increase our control in all these areas. And then after that, we go for overseas exploration as our next tech, which allows us to explore out into the world. You know, beyond Iberia here, you cannot explore open water without this, and so we are prevented from colonizing the New World until then, and we have so many advantages for building as subjects. We really want to leverage these with colonies, and so we want to get on it, so we do go for overseas exploration. Notably, all of these are in the New World tree, so we went for the very best techs, like paved roads, that are kind of at the beginning of the tree for the printing press, and now we're doing a similar thing for the New World's tree. North Africa, we declare war on, and we feed Marrakesh a whole bunch of territory fighting Morocco in terms of resolving this war that we had declared. Marrakesh is just kind of in the south-ish here. We're not planning on annexing Marrakesh, and eventually we do make them into a march for ourselves. Next up, we upgrade from 120 barks to 140. In particular, we're pushing the maritime. We're kind of doing okay. We're throttled by sailors. A little bit of a weird idiosyncrasy that we don't really abuse, and maybe we should abuse it in this run, and we just didn't very much, is that the best place to get sailors is not in urban buildings or in urban locations, it's in rural locations. And the reason for this is the village, the fishery village, gives like 5 sailors, and I think you get 15 from a dock, but you can only have 1 level of a dock, and you can have like up to 10 levels of villages, and so we could get like triple to quadruple the amount of sailors in rural locations. The problem is these fishing buildings aren't profitable, so we would have to subsidize them to keep them employed, but then we would have way more sailors. And this is probably what we should have done, but I kind of don't like the balancing on that. To me, that strikes me as very strange, but also maybe there needs to be a better way to get sailors, or a better way for Venice specifically to get sailors, because we have all these places that we have trade outposts in that we could push maritime, but our main throttle is the amount of sailors that we have. And so this is a little bit of an interesting one, especially if you're playing really, really tall as Venice. You can only build 1 level of dock in a building, and so there's not really a very good way for you to push a ton of sailors, and so this is a little bit of an uncomfortable situation, but we're moving from 120 to 140. We sell another location to Granada for 1515, just to provide a little bit of context. Remember, not too long ago, we were making 300 ducats a month, and I think that was with the parliament tax. And so this represents a lot of money to us at this point in time. We actually have an update in terms of the money. We are at 25% crown power at this point in time. Remember that crown power does throttle your trade income, but also it gives you, if you're under 25, you get negative tax efficiency. So this is an important threshold for us, and I think this might be the first time we get above 25% crown power. We are getting 200 gold net. So that's half a year of income for selling the location of Granada that we wanted them to have anyways. We are getting 250 in trade income, 350 in tax income, and the year is 1448. In 1449, we finish our annexation on Mantua here, and then we start annexing Fez. So we start annexing our subject down here, or one of our subjects. I think we have 2 intertwined, and it's a little bit of an awkward situation. And Fez actually doesn't finish incorporating something before we annex them, so we're left with an unincorporated territory, which is a little bit annoying. But when we go for parliamentary tax, so this is 1 year later, our income goes up to 500. Just to give a little bit of an inkling how much parliament tax is worth, it's worth about 20% total increased income. If you get way more for the 1 year it's active, but over the course of the parliament entire cycle, over the course of 5 years, it does represent about a 20% increase in income. And we are clicking the parliament tax nearly every single parliament because we don't need the CBs because we have all of these levers we've acquired. Right? We have levers in here. We have Spoleto that we released that has claims. We have some claims in... we have claims in Granada has a claim on Castile, which we eventually use. We have the Sicilia, which has claims, the Carinids, which have claims, the Caricids, which have claims. We have Marrakesh, which has claims. This other subject, which I can't remember has claimed, or we maybe release them later, and we have this subject in the middle of here, which also has claims. So we're not using Parliament for that, and we've already got our laws in place, all this type of stuff, so the natural kind of course of action for us now is just to kind of increase tax every time with our Parliament. I do wish there was more choices in regards to kind of once you have a lot of stuff set up, what you can do with Parliament. It feels really, really good in the early game where it feels like there's a lot of trade-offs. But then you start to feel like you're just doing increased max taxes most of the time, and then I guess you're kind of doing Parliament CB some of the time, but the Parliament CB now is significantly worse than the CB you get from your subjects, so there's not much reason to use the Parliament CB. Except to acquire a new lever. So we used a Parliament CB on Sicily because we didn't have a way of getting in on Sicily. There was no chain of there was no chain or conga line that we could have done to be getting in on them specifically. And so an important note is that we are getting 15 gold through sound tolls, and the sound tolls coming through this southern portion of Iberia right here because we own the location, and these count as trade, and so the amount of money we get is enhanced by our being a merchant republic, by us having this merchant republic reform and these types of things, and so that is a little bit useful for us. We deck on Byzantium here after this, and I'm sure we had a lever for doing it because I don't think we used a parliament to do it. But what we do is we take Constantinople. Oh, we decked on not by the Byzantine Empire, but this released Byzantine subject thing that often gets released. Biz is over here, and they've lost this to an independent Byzantium type thing. And actually, now that I recall, we did use a Parliament CB on this, but we just take Constantinople, and then we transfer, we take this here in Urdine, and we transfer some subjects over to them, or not subjects, some locations over to them, but we just own Constantinople ourselves. And a big part of this is, if you own just the trade center, often you can gain control of trade in the area if you invest max trade buildings in that trade center, and also maybe a little bit of these overseas buildings and kind of dotting the coastline and other people. Often we can gain control of that market, and we do gain control of Constantinople, I think, shortly after this period in time. We get a unique building, which might even be in this, which is the Magistrate alla Sanita, which gives 5% research speed, and it also gives... these are also really, really good. They're capital only, but they can be built to multiple levels, and they give 10% crown power. So we have like 11 of them in the capital. But we talked about that last episode. But are we going to see... It doesn't look like we have this, but it gives a little bit of research speed, and it also gives us the... disease resistance, which is kind of an interesting modifier if you stack a lot of it, because it does give you an advantage in a weird way, in that malaria is a significant kind of reason why colonizing Africa is rough, and if you stack enough disease resistance, this gets a lot better for you, if I recall correctly. I'm not sure if the disease resistance applies to your locations, though. If it applies to your locations and not your pops, then you're not going to be that assisted until your colony actually pops, at which point it would just be for your future colony. I guess you could hold on to the territory. We do grant the burgher rights that we had talked about earlier, giving us an additional tax. Our max tax goes from 23% on the burghers to 33%. And this for us represents around 100 ducats of income, but it's important to emphasize, remember, we built roads, but our burghers also built roads, and if we're taking 100 gold in taxes from the burghers, then they're not getting 100 gold, right? So it's not 100 pure income, but we also have tax efficiency modifiers. We're actually probably only taking 80 from them and getting 100 for ourselves. Much like that guy who's in that loud car, he got the bag for himself so that he could buy that car. But okay. The year is 1450, and we hit a new kind of threshold. We have 2.18 million pops, and we have, in Constantinople alone, 130,000 pops, and this is our most populous area in Constantinople here. And so that is going to be a little bit of an issue for us, because this actually decreases our crown power. It decreases our crown power because there's so many pops there, and crown power is calculated proportionally by location, and pops give power. And so if there's a lot of pops, especially a lot of nobles, and noble or burghers or any kind of upgraded pops, which there are in Constantinople, they get counted as part of the pie that goes towards crown power. So we kind of don't like that as high pop. It would maybe even prefer a lower pop version of Constantinople. But okay, we also have the trade center, and we can build more and louder cars out there. We could build more merchant quarters and this type of stuff in Constantinople by virtue of it having more pops. And so, okay, maybe it's kind of okay for us to be getting that. In Constantinople, in the market, we have 44 trade advantage. 27 of it is owned, 11 is maritime, and 6 is from foreign buildings. The Ottomans at this point in time have 96 trade advantage. So I guess it's going to be a little bit of time before we gain control of this trade area. They have 60 from owned locations. They have 10 from maritime, and they have 25 from trade focus, which I think is an event for them, or DHE or something like this, but it is giving them quite a bit. So I think it's when that wears off and we put in a little bit more investment in the maritime. Remember, we did build more of these boats, and we start to, instead of having them come around the boot, we redirect them to go towards Byzantium, and us eventually having proximity with Byzantium is an important goal for us, and that's really far away. Like, to kind of let's find the map here. We are coming from Venice here, and then we're kind of coming through here and getting all the way. That's a lot of sea locations to go in. And that's really far from Venice as far as the map flies, unlike the Crow, which of course stays seated as it should. We also get this Fall of Constantinople dynamic historical event, which gives us I think like a bunch of prestige or something like this, because we took out Constantinople, and it gives us some options whether we want to sack it or not. A little bit of flavor that was cool. And we also embrace pike and shot as technology, and I think we just embrace it mostly for the research speed. We finished annexing Fez, so now we have a bit of territory in North Africa that isn't all that great, but we also actually want a lot of trade capacity in North Africa for future colonial reasons, and so this is why we're actually annexing here. We're not going to build too many buildings here, except for goods that are needed, like lower tier goods, like masonry. Can't build much lumber because there isn't a lot of vegetation up here, which is required. We can even take a look at the vegetation, but you need vegetation to be able to build lumber mills, and actually there is a decent amount of vegetation. It's just not down here. There's like very little vegetation. Okay, so I think we end up building quite a bit of lumber mills too then, but the main idea here is that it doesn't matter your level of control when it comes to trade capacity. Trade capacity is just straight across. So when we build a merchant or marketplace here, it's worth just as much as a marketplace elsewhere, other than it's being in a different market. It doesn't get diminished by lack of control, it doesn't get diminished by lack of market access, and so even though these are far-flung territories, we're still going to be able to make good use of them. What we start doing is we start annexing Bologna. So you can see we're not even finished with Mantua. We really didn't own all that much territory here, and we're starting to get a lot of it going, in particular because there's a penalty on the last stage, which gives everyone a lot more cultural tradition, which makes you annex them slower. That penalty is now gone, that we are in the next age. Now that we're out of the age of Renaissance and into the age of discovery, that penalty is gone, so a lot of our annexations are going to also be happening a little bit faster here as well. We also go after some silver. Let's find where that is. We actually don't go for the silver, but we go for Trebizond, and we are going for another market capital here. And so I do think we needed to use a Parliament CB to be able to get deck on them, but something that we actually had a little bit of a decision about was whether or not to take the silver, because there is some silver up here, and the thing is, we eventually decided not to take it. I think Trebizond is here with the silk, but we decided not to take it. Incidentally, Constantinople also silk, but decided not to take the silver. We could have taken the silver, we could have built some silver, but this is, unfortunately for us, this is Asia, and you can't build bailiffs overseas anymore. And so, pretty much no matter what we would do, this would have either zero control, or we would have to urbanize it. I guess we maybe could have taken the silver and then urbanized it, but the point is we basically would have very, very difficult time of extracting value out of this, other than building it just so that we can make sure it has maximum RGOs, and then building a whole ton of silver, not for the purposes of tax base, but just for the purposes of trade, just to be able to export it from Trebizond market, which maybe that would have been okay, but we don't end up taking the silver. Was a little bit of an interesting decision point for us, and we also kind of not pictured take and release a subject Imereti from Georgia up in the north, which acts as a lever. I don't think we really use it too much, if at all, but we kind of just wanted to have it. We do have a screenshot of our Venice game that is on our Discord / it is also in our YouTube posts. We're not allowed to repost it, but in that we do have the extent of our expansion, and including the little bit that we did in the Caucasus, that is going to be our subject here. So up until now, we haven't really been urbanizing too much, but because there's so much urbanization already in Italy, this is definitely something that's different from a lot of other runs where actually upgrading stuff to urbanize it is more of a consideration. But at this point in time, we do, with the wine and the fruit kind of in this Istria region, we town all of it. Because the wine is... to base price, we have a huge glut of it in our markets, so the price is low anyways. It basically doesn't really make much money. It's perfect for an urban area. And then fruit is also base price 1, and we have a glut of that as well. So we are going to urbanize probably every single wine and fruit location that is anywhere near what we can do anything useful with anything. We also come in and we go for a little bit of migration on Chioggia. And let's kind of find the names so that we know that we're talking about the right place. But I do believe that is right down here. Is that down there? Maybe the names and locations have changed a little bit, but it's a location that's in here somewhere that is on a river that flows in through here, and the idea is we want to build a pound lock canal there. The proximity goes from Venice to this location, and then it goes up the stream, and so we want to gain a little bit of extra control so that we can do, or a little bit of extra proximity so we get a little bit of extra control. Next up, we dock on the Ottomans. Again, using one of our levers. I forget which one of these guys that we use to be able to deck on them, but we're going to just start nabbing a bunch of coastline from them, because eventually we do want to annex the coast. We can get control this far, especially over here. Over here is starting to be a little bit of an ask, and it's going to be more of a long-term thing, but also we want to just kind of completely cut them off so that we have control over the way the territories expand. If we have them completely surrounded, just in long-term, then first of all, we can use this to gain more sailors, which again is kind of a little bit of a thing that we have difficulty with. But if we surround them completely, no one else can attack them, and they can't attack anyone else. So a little bit of stuff going on there. The year is 1453, and we start overseas exploration. We do get the tech, and we are off to find the New World. We unlock or go for the early Arbaquest tech, and a big reason why is we are struggling with this, are you stronger than a 5th grader? And by a 5th grader, we mean our subjects. And we have too much subject power relative to us, so this is the disadvantage of expanding via the levers. We are really, really struggling to maintain enough loyalty to keep the annexations up, and this pauses the annexations and it makes things slower, and you have to improve relations, and there's a bunch of pressure on your diplo. But we go early Arbaquest because if we get more military power, this is going to increase our subjects' loyalty by increasing our power relative to them. Unfortunately, I think it actually might just work by the number of units you have, and it doesn't care about how strong they are. I'm not 100% sure in this, but it didn't feel very responsive to us doing this. It felt pretty responsive to us adding units. We'll have to try just intentionally building a bunch of really, really low upgraded units sometime, because those are cheaper on a per unit maintenance to maintain this type of thing. We're also in 8K in debt at this point in time. We acquire a bunch of debt, and it was largely from a bunch of events. And so this is a little bit annoying for us. In terms of what we add a bunch of heavy infantry. We add 3x heavy infantry. I guess that's a lot for us right now. Or no, we add 3x heavy infantry, which is not the Arbaquest, because we're curious if those count. And that was what we were doing there. Okay. In terms of research, the research costs of individual texts right now for us, just to kind of give some numbers and some context, is 32.5, and the amount we are getting per month is 2.41. And in particular, research is now a lot slower than it was on previous patches because the flat amount has increased, but when you embrace an institution, you get 5% more research speed, and so this kind of offsets it a little bit, but it offsets it if you don't have any other research speed modifiers. You did have other research speed modifiers, and so it ends up being slower. I kind of like that it's slower because it means you have to make more decisions about what you're going to research, and you can't research everything, which it was kind of feeling like you could research everything. But an important thing to note is because of this, because you are getting 15% from the first age, 15% from the second age, 15th Third Age, etc., etc., etc. This really dilutes the power of research speed modifiers at this current juncture. I've left some feedback for this because I think research speed modifiers are meant to be seen as strong, and right now they're not very strong, just because of how the math works out. We are getting, in terms of our research, we are getting 1.2 flat from being, one, just kind of the base value from being a settled country, and two, from having the most powerful liturgical language. In terms of percentage modifiers, we are getting 31% from literacy, 45% from embraced institutions, 20% from estate satisfaction on our clergy, and 5% from unique buildings. We don't have any text, but just to kind of imagine, you didn't have that 45% already from embraced institutions, then a 5% modifier would increase your research speed by a larger amount relative to kind of the previous amount that you would have. So I didn't write down which locations we seized from our subjects or which subjects, but we seized 3 locations. In theory, this is probably a thing where, so there's a subject loyalty modifier, and then there is like a modifier where are your subjects mad at you for a particular thing or not, and it decays towards 0 either way. So if you have negative amount of that, it'll decay towards 0, negative being good, and if you have positive, subjects are pissed at you, like in terms of positive value, which is negative for you, very confusing, then this will decay back to 0. So in some sort of sense, you should always be taking locations from your subjects. If you're not using your decay, you're losing it. And so we take 3 locations, and at this point in 1455, we are up to 2.5 million pops. And so this is a number we're trying to track, just generally speaking, to kind of give you guys an idea of where we are. And now we do a move that's going to be very important if they don't change how things work, is we attack Joluf. Also, incidentally, Mali is now only this location here, and all the rest of this out here is now its subjects. So that's a little bit of change in terms of how Mali looks. But we attack Joluf, and we take a whole bunch of coastline. And there is a location here called Bir Dun. Yadun, it's Bir Dun, which is a really good natural harbor. But important to us, we're going to want there to be a capital there. Not our capital, but we put a market capital there, and the whole point of this is because of the way exploration works, where Niani is the market capital here. You cannot trade with Niani, unless Nani, you can't trade with Niani unless you have a line that you can trace to the market capital. You cannot, from your perspective along the coast, explore in far enough to find Niani, and you can't, even if you take a location on the coast and you explore one area in, you still can't find Niani. So this means you can't trade for slaves with this market. Because of that, we need to make our own market, and this is what we do, and this is a big part of getting really off the ground running in regards to colonization and triangle trade. So we take this territory, we make a market in Bir Dun, and then we release it as a colonial subject. Incidentally, this ends up being a really strong colonial subject, and our colonial subjects are very loyal because they're a different category than the vassal. And I'm not even sure that they care about power level, and so this for us is going to represent a really, really big thing. In theory, we definitely should have fought Mali a whole lot more. I just didn't feel like going for it. I felt like mainly focusing on the Mediterranean. There's a tremendous amount of good resources here, but our subject, over time, really, really pops off. They build a ton of urban locations, and we build up trade in them. We're trying to get trade capacity because we're going to use it to trade lumber and masonry and this type of stuff over to the colonies, and so we're building merchants, marketplaces and this type of stuff in their territory, but they are getting super, super rich by pushing all this gold that still is in the market, the newly founded market, to places like Bordeaux in France and to Castile, like this type of stuff. They're just pushing the gold. They're getting huge margins on the trade, and we get, because they are a colonial subject, we get 1/3 of their trade capacity, so we get a bunch of trades, and we are getting like 4 or 5 ducats from these trades, whereas the trade capacity like that we are using back in Italy, this for us is worth significantly less, and so this is a little bit of an interesting kind of thing and play pattern where we are gaining a big chunk of control and like big amount of value here, and we're going to use this to be able to really facilitate our quest for the new world by being able to trade slaves, which we couldn't do because we can't trade with Niani market because it is too far inland. I guess we should show Niani. It's right here. It is this gold pile right in there. So this is Niani right in here. And the way that exploration works is you explore, I think, entire areas at a time. And there's multiple areas before you get to them. Looks like we don't have an areas map mode here in this feedback, but it is too far inland, and so that is going to be the way the cookie crumbles for us. We get the General's Bothered event, which gives you a chance to pick 5 progress towards either naval or 5 progress towards land. And we've gotten this before, but the reason we're bringing it up now is because we finally get 100 naval progress. And so this is in around 110 years, 120 years after game start, we've hit 100 of the naval value that we've been trying to push the entire game. And so this is going to be a bit of a thing. In terms of Constantinople, we do gain control of the market at this point in time from the Ottomans. We have 154 trade advantage, and they have 84. 108 of ours is coming from maritime. So we shifted over the ships. The ships have had some time to do work, and we also are getting 38 from owned territory, 7 from foreign, and the Ottomans are getting 84. We don't have the breakdown of them. We finish annexing Florence, or perhaps this is starting annexing Florence. This must be finished because we also have the year, 1456, and now we are up to 3 million pops. And you can see we've annexed, I think in the span of this episode, Mantua, Bologna, Florence, and so we already annexed Ferrara, and so now the chunk is getting much, much bigger for us here. There's kind of a few little guys up in here, but we are gaining more and more territory, and what we do is we also accept Tuscan. Remember, we improved cultural relation with them earlier this episode, so it is going to be cheaper for us to accept them. And in terms of our cultural capacity, we have 3 total capacity, and we only need 0.15 to accept them. 0.5 to tolerate, 0.15 to accept, and all of these become cores. Just for a little bit of a kind of reference, our most expensive thing is tolerance of Greeks, because some Greeks somewhere apparently have a lot of culture. And because they have a lot of culture, it makes tolerating them a lot more expensive. They also don't have good cultural relations with us, so they are going to cost 0.94, which is quite a bit. We do change up our our cabinet actions a little bit here. Why don't we take a look at, why don't we let a different map mode be the background here? We change encourage urbanization, which is promoting a whole bunch of our pops to different levels because we don't have a bunch of buildings already built. We change this to assimilate area, and I think that we start, I forget where exactly we start assimilating. I think we started assimilating in Tuscany, even though it's already cored. The point here is that we are trying to turn them Tuscan. It's the first big clump that we can really do in terms of area, that we have a big entire area or very near. I think we're missing 1 or 2 locations, and we just want to assimilate a lot more pops, which is going to help us to push culture later, and is going to, or it would decrease the cost of accepting Tuscan, except we're already at the floor. 0.15 is going to be the floor. But maybe we started assimilating over here. That would also make sense because it's not fully accepted. I don't know exactly where, but we are doing this. We are going to just, generally speaking, we are going to just continue annexing Italians, and we are not really going to do too many more updates, but we're going to just annex a whole bunch of the little guys in Italy here, and then we are also going to continue doing small ball in Anatolia, taking territories here and there, and we are going to continue to do small ball in Maghreb, continuing to fight Morocco, and then also in Italy. So we're not going to update a ton on these wars because I think we've been updating a lot, and I think that the general idea has kind of been achieved, where we're acquiring levers, we're going for these small wars. And just to emphasize, we're not going for a 100% war score because we're trying to keep the antagonism relatively low. I think eventually we kick it up in this episode, but we are going for the small ones because you can get in and out quickly. If you can fight 2 wars for 50 war score faster than you can fight 1 for 100, you should fight the 2 wars, especially because antagonism is generally really strongly tied to culture and religion, and so if you mix it up like we are doing, you can kind of avoid a lot of the negativity. But we do kind of open up a new front on Tunis, so we co-belligerate Tlemcen when we deck on Morocco for the next wars to get on Tunis, so that we can get the market capital there. And so that is going to be a good reason for this. In terms of tax, we go for early arbiquis, because we hadn't researched it yet, but this is a big reason for I thought we had researched it, I guess we haven't. Slave centers, because we want to put slave centers down here so that they produce slaves. We haven't even really gotten a colony finished, but we're really getting ready for this ahead of time. And improved trade ships, which are going to help us for the merchantime stuff. We are also going for a dedicated foundry afterwards, which gives plus 75% iron output. And then we are going for diplo training, which I think gives, if I'm not mistaken, it either gives diplo capacity or it gives extra diplomats, both of which are going to be useful for us. And then, here we have the note. It gives us a little bit of monthly diplo. Just as a point of emphasis with the monthly diplo, that is what's throttling us in a large part to be able to annex all these guys, because we're having to improve relations, we're having to annex, which costs 0.1, and then another 0.1 going towards improving or supporting loyalists, because our loyalty, we're having problems. So and eventually we slow down our expansion, and the reason why is so we can save diplomats. And so I think we get 0.1 or 0.05 diplomats from that technology, but it is quite good for us. We are doing quite well in Fez and Tunis. We are controlling both Fez and Tunis, per our note, or maybe this is that we're trying to, respectively, we have a 48 trade capacity in Fez and 27 trade capacity in Tunis, and our profit is 94 and 61. So a little bit more profit per trade capacity in Tunis, but the more you expand your trade capacity, the less profit you tend to make per trade, generally speaking. So you kind of have decreasing returns on trade investment, and you kind of have increasing returns on well, you don't have increasing returns on production either. You have decreasing returns on production because you tend to push the price down. But as you build up economies of scale, you do have increasing returns on production. But an interesting thing is that trade increases your production profit as well, because it helps to push the prices up. And so if you overbuild fine cloth, and then fine cloth collapses in price, then you're not making a lot through it. If you expand trade, then they export fine cloth, and now you make a little bit more income from production. And also production, even when you're decreasing the production profit, it's helping to increase your trade profit. So both operate kind of hand in hand in terms of the mechanics. And so just looking at the numbers, it's difficult to appreciate additional value you're getting, except we don't control any of the production in these two markets, so we kind of only really care about the trade. We control a little bit in Morocco, but we have no control over there, like the mechanic control, and so we won't get anything from the trade base there anyways, really. So it's not going to be something we care about. So we just kind of care about the trade numbers only for the most part. So I think we have a few wars in between our last war and this next one, but we declare on Pitigliano here, and the important part here is that this war is going to get us into a fight with the Papal States and Naples. According to our note, this is our first war with both, but I thought we had fought Naples a little bit before. Maybe not. Maybe we had just fought Sicily in that Sicilian war, but they are going to... What we go for is annul allies from the Papal States, because they were allied with some people. So maybe I was just mixing up this war and the previous war where we talked about fighting the Papal States, and this is in fact our first war. We, at this point in time, have 36 infantry units, just to kind of give a couple numbers. And in terms of what we do with Naples, this is kind of really awkward spot. I think Papal States at some point expanded for them, and so what we do is we grab this territory here in Naples, and then we grab territory here, and we cut off their capital from the control elsewhere. Generally, the AI hates when you do this, and they won't accept peace deals. They're actually pretty good about not accepting peace deals, but Naples accepts this one, and because all of this is going to have low control in the back, it's going to be cheaper for us to get in subsequent wars, so this is pretty important for us. The year is 1460, so I guess for the timeline, we probably didn't declare too many wars in between, and we discover the New World. In 1461, the ledger for the income, we are getting 1306 in income. The next biggest is Coke Timur, with 687. Just to kind of give a little bit of perspective on how we are doing. I don't know if that's total income. I think that might be total income, not net. In terms of our income, here we have, okay, we're getting 535 from trade, 618 from tax, so we are getting nearly half as much from trade as we are from tax. And, you know, with setups like we have in Maghreb, where we just have access to the trade here and we have no tax, this is going to be really pushing us a lot towards trade in terms of value, as opposed to kind of here where we have more production orientation here. We unlock paper and books workshops. And this is generally where I think a lot of liftoff is achieved. Like, you're setting up a whole lot of stuff, but really, the numbers are quite strong, but they don't appear very strong. The margins are a little bit small, but you get a lot of multipliers when you upgrade from a guild to a workshop. And we might even have the numbers here. Let's take a little bit of a look. Okay, so we just got the text, and it's only a little bit later that we kind of take a look at the numbers, but we're skipping ahead to look at the numbers here and now. The workshop for paper, and we're kind of doing a little bit of analysis on this. The guild takes 1.65 ducats worth of income, or worth of inputs, and turns them into 2 ducats worth of outputs at base prices, which base prices aren't going to be the case, but this is just for the purpose of analysis. The workshop takes 1.5 of inputs and makes 2.2 in terms of output. And so this is doubling the net output. But in terms of nominally, it doesn't look like a lot when you say your output goes from a value of 2 to a value of 2.2. But it is doubling the net output from 0.35 to 0.7. But also, they allow you to build around 30% more levels. And whatever mechanic it is that allows you to build more levels, it's kind of opaque. But as you get an upgraded form, and there's 4 forms, there goes guild, workshop, manufactory, and then mill. But as you upgrade each form, you get more max levels. And the max levels allow you to get more economy of scale. Your economy of scales goes from 16 to 31, let's say, which is what we have in Venice. For Venice, the cap for us is 16 for guilds and 31 for, which is actually more like double the buildings, but it depends on the population, because base values are more valuable with lower level buildings. For most buildings, it's going to be 30% more. For us in Venice, it's like 100% more levels, and this leads us to have go from around 40% production efficiency to 74% production efficiency being applied to a value that's already doubled. And so what this means for us is that we go from net income of around 0.49 to around 1.2, or 2.5 to 3 times the amount of income from this upgrade. Now, we had to build a lot more buildings, but eventually, once you've spun up the economy quite a bit, what you're actually gated by is the number of buildings that you have, or the number of building slots, or the max level that you can have of a particular type of building. And so what this does is, if that's what your throttle is, this effectively 2.5x's. And very often you spin up the economy and then you hit that throttle, max level of buildings of the good industries, you just can't build anymore. And so what this is just an enormous liftoff, because you're 2.5xing your way through what is throttling you. And so this is a pretty big deal. Hopefully that didn't get too lost in the sauce of math, didn't want to get too deep into it, but just to emphasize and kind of unpack how valuable it is to go up to the workshops. Workshops are just really powerful relative to the previous level, because it's applying multiple aspects that are multiplicatively effective with each other. The base PM getting better is improvement, and the max level is getting better is an improvement, and they are multiplicatively applied to each other. Okay, looking back to our note before, this is what we're researching. We're researching the paper and books now, so we will be getting those later. We also are researching Trading Hub, which gives you additional market attraction and 5 trade capacity in places that are market capitals. So that's a lot of trade capacity, and we are starting to get a lot of trade capitals. So that is going to be pretty nice, especially because, generally speaking, the trade we have in, like, Constantinople is more valuable than the trade we have, back in here, because we're oversaturated in Milan and Venice. These trades are worth between 1 and 2, and then the ones in, like, Constantinople or Maghreb are worth, like, 2.2, something like this. But the trade is just a little bit more valuable on these things, and so that is going to be nice. And we also are getting something that increases export capacity, which gives us proximity through port. We ask Castile for a little bit of money, and I think that this is something that's kind of a little overtuned. We don't really abuse it, but this is an example of something that is a diplomatic pressure for us, because we are using all of our diplomatic points, or our diplo capacity, or we were early on using all of our diplo capacity to maintain subjects. We now have Castile as an ally, so we generate favors, and so we have this trade-off between allies for favors or for subjects. But with Castile, we ask them for money with those favors, and they give us 6.6k, which is a lot. Very often they won't actually have enough money to give us stuff, so we can't ask them for money, but it costs us 25 favors. I forget about how much we generate per year, but this represents, I think, like 20 years of waiting, or 20 years worth of being an ally, without any bumps that we are getting from joining their war, where we will get more favors. But this is going to be a huge amount of money for us at this point in time. Also, regarding our subjects, we have minus 75 in terms of loyalty from our subjects being too powerful. So this is a little bit of a thing, and we are crimped on subject capacity. So we're kind of paying for this alliance with Castile that gave us this payout of the 6.6k, and I'm going through it to cancel some allies maybe. We noticed that we have a subject with the Bank of the Medicis, which I don't think does anything having them as vassals, so we cancel that. That bank is, in fact, cancelled. But at this point, we just have to slow down. I think we might even cancel our alliance with Castile after this. Our Diplo is too pinched, and what we do is we stop going to war, and we super overbuild the army, and we just put the army slider to 0, and we just put up tons and tons of troops. That way, this pushes the 75 value down, and so this way we can keep annexing people while actually, getting this way we can keep annexing people, and if we keep expanding via subjects, that minus 75 is only going to get worse and worse and worse. And so at this point, this is the point where we really do slow down. So we, I think at this point in time, start our first colonies. I'm not sure if we're starting them or finishing them. We have our first colony in Havana, and then our second colony is in, I think we are starting it in Hispaniola, which is down here. This one will form a new market, and then Havana will be in that market. But in particular, Cuba seems like really the area where you can get a lot of value in a pretty immediate fashion as far as colonies go. And outside of this, the event horizon is going to be pretty long, but the resources here are spectacular. Chile is a spice, so it's going to be nice. Base price is going to be 5, but it's going to trade for half the capacity. And so from the perspective of trade, which is kind of the perspective we operate from, it's going to effectively have a base price of 10. There's a bit of a gold in here. There is a tobacco, which is going to be nice because the price is going to skyrocket once it's introduced to the old world. You create a bunch of needs, and then you fulfill those needs. And right off the bat, I'm pretty sure that we can start importing slaves here because we have what we had set up in Bir Dun. Recall that we had set up this trade colony here. It's expanding, it's getting more trade capacity, and once these colonies finish, because I think we just started them, we immediately start sending slaves over. Immediately. And also lumber and masonry from the Bir Dun market. So this is really facilitating our ability to run this up a little bit faster. So we do get those started. We improve cultural opinion with Castilian, because we really did have a lot of favors saved up. So I guess maybe we're still trying to hold on to the ally with Castile, which is maybe a mistake here. I do think we have Castile on the map somewhere. or we don't. And so we do improve their cultural opinion. This isn't very valuable, but very often they're not going to have enough money to give us buckets of ducats. And eventually I do think we might start grabbing some of their territory, so it is nice to have them accepted. We have Croatia, and we start putting in a assimilate area on them. They do have a negative view on us in terms of their cultural opinion, which makes them more expensive to accept. And so rather than accept them because we can't improve cultural opinion because we don't have a subject and we burned our cooldown anyways, it was a 50-year cooldown, we burned it on Tuscan and 1,000,000, right? And so we are going to... Is it a 50-year cooldown? We improved it with 1,000,000, and we're not 50 years in. I'm not sure what the cooldown is, but the point is we can't use it on Croatia, and so this is going to be, we're just going to assimilate area over them, and so that's going to be fine for us. We break our alliance now with Castile. So no more friendship for Castile. I think maybe we were waiting for the 50 threshold to improve relations and then get out. And so this way we have enough Diplo cap. We also swap to Diplo traditions from Diplo traditions, which was giving us more Diplo cap. So this is why we dropped Castile. We swapped from Diplo traditions in terms of the government reform to fixed vassal obligations. And fixed vassal obligations gives us plus 15 loyalty. So that minus 75 effectively is turned into minus 60, which is much more manageable for us. So we do get a little bit more research in. We are researching formalized relations, which gives us Diplo capacity, Caravel, which is going to allow us to push control all throughout here quite a bit better, and a tech that gives a plus 20% max RGO size. And we don't have any updates for a while. The last time we updated on the date was 1461. This update is 1473. We colonize the Hudson, and we resume expansion. We upgrade from Bark to Caravel, and that upgrade, so we finished researching it in this time, we go from 0.14 in terms of pushing maritime per ship to 0.2. So this represents basically a 50% increase in the amount of maritime we can. We expand and we grab the Algeria markets. So to come over to Maghreb that we have here, we grab from Tlemcen. There's Algeria here, except Tlemcen I think is gone, and it's a subject of Morocco. We grab Catalonia from the Aragonese, or no, from the Tunisians, I think, actually. We fought Tunis, and Tunis had taken over this, and so we grabbed them. There was nothing, I think Aragon was completely gone at this point. And so we grab Catalan from Tunisia, and then we get the West North Africa coast, which we had already had. So we now have kind of a large control over this western portion of the Mediterranean. We are missing Sevilla in terms of market control, but in terms of Maghreb, we have Tunis, we have this, and we have Fez. So we have pretty full locked-in control. And then we also have control elsewhere as well, right? We have Constantinople, we have Ragusa, and we have Trebizond, which is going to be over here. And so kind of, for the most part, and also up north of here, Kaffa is under the control of a subject of Genoa. And so really the only places that we don't have control of now, at this point in time, are that Sevilla and the places that are controlled by Egypt. And so this is pretty significant. We're starting to really dominate the Mediterranean. In 1475, we do hit a 69 dev in Venice, which is nice, and the Marian finishes. So our first colony also finishes, and so that's Marian over here. And Marian, by the end of this game, or by the end of kind of where we are, really gets actually quite strong. And I was very surprised to see just how strong they had gotten. It was really quite impressive. Masonry, lumber, settlements, all of these kind of get pushed. Settlements are going to give you 1% population growth, which is enormous. You have to build them in low pop areas. We spam them in our colonial subjects, really giving a lot of pop growth. Like, we invest 10k pop, and I think by the end they're at like 100k pop at the like 70 years from now. So that is quite a big come up in terms of speed. We also push glass towards them, and every time we make a colonial subject, we're not going to repeat ourselves on this. We give them 5 ducats a month. I feel that this kind of gets them going and makes them perform generally a lot better, because they're just getting this huge influx of money per their margin, and just to kind of get them off the ground. But they do also release as republics, and I think they release with some of our setup, and so since our setup is pretty good at this point in time, it is going to be nice. We also send them naval supplies and liquor, and then slaves, of course, and so all of this, of course, is coming from this beer done market that we had set up ahead of time here. Just to be a little bit clear here, in terms of our expansion, we are only taking market capitals for ourselves. Everything else is going to subjects unless it's in Italy, just to be a little bit clarifying here. But coming up, we have some tech that we're researching, including additional merchants, which was part of our admin selection for that age, our admin focus. We go for native policy, which is going to give us some goodies later, which is a law, and then we get a proximity through maritime tech that we are going to be researching. So these are going to be coming in, or these are the ones that are coming in that we want to emphasize in particular, especially because we actually can start pushing a little bit of control into like Croatia and also some of the stuff we've taken down here, and we are starting to creep up the coast. And a lot of the proximity is coming from Venice via maritime, and so it is going to be pretty important for us. The Manhattan, or Manhattan colony finishes up in North America, but in Central America, Havana is soon to follow here. So we are almost done with this colony. We're going to give it the same treatment we did Marian. Our colonial cost is just 3 ducats at this point in time, and our explore cost is 42. And so the colonial cost is really cheap. We definitely could have put out a lot more colonies than we did, but it was more that I thought it was unnecessary to like kind of illustrate some points than I thought it was impossible. But also, other than the colonies that we get in Cuba, they aren't going to pay off for a very long period of time. So it's not necessarily the case that we should pay for a lot of them now, but maybe in 30 to 40 years, we should just blast everywhere. Something like this when we have a lot more money available. Generally speaking, the ramp up per extra additional colony is maybe a little bit too low, but something we noticed is Marian was more than happy to colonize once it got up and going, and they colonized quite a bit, and I think a big part of that is because they have gold here. They were really making a lot of money, and so we were getting quite a bit of them just from subject income rather than just their trade, but we are also getting quite a bit from trade. It is at this point that we have in our notes here all that analysis we talked through in regards to the paper being maybe 2.5 times, making 2.5 times as much money, and just kind of want to emphasize here, our throttle is not money in terms of what we can build. We can build stuff, but it would be far away, and it would have poor market access, poor control, and we wouldn't get much value from it. Our throttle is not construction speed, our throttle is not pop promotions, and our throttle is not really pops, although I do think we had a little bit of a shortage in Venice specifically. Our throttle is building levels and max building levels, and so the workshops, again, really unlock it and allow us to get 2.5x times as many building levels on the key industries that are good. We could expand into other industries, but they just wouldn't make that much money. And so we City Treveso on that topic, which is right up here, which is, incidentally, this is our highest pop location. I think it has like 80 or 90,000. Our highest pop other than Constantinople. Our highest pop location in Italy at this point in time. I think, or maybe Brescia has more, and I think Milan has more, but we haven't annexed Milan yet. And for city level, when you get upgraded to a city, your cap goes plus 10 in terms of building levels. And we didn't do the math just now, but we did the math earlier. The base cost of upgrading to a city is 5k. And so we we spend somewhere between 2.2 and 2.7k when we upgrade. And so, okay. We also upgrade in terms of city level, just to kind of come on over to where we have the names of stuff. We also upgrade Modena, Medicina, which I don't recall exactly where this is on the map, but we upgrade that. Pesaro and Lavanga. So, to be clear, we just dropped about 15k into cities here, giving you an idea of how much money we have. We are starting to spin it up, and again, a big portion of this spinning it up is our workshops are starting to be finished by now. And this is why we had done the math and why we were able to do the math and take a look at the stuff. We start a colony in Louisiana, which I think it's just visible here. And a big part of where we choose where to start the colonies, there's like two things that we are really looking for. Is we're looking for harbor capacity, because we want that colony's capital to be a place with good harbor capacity. And we are looking for good resources. And we are looking for places that are not like right on top of other colonies, because we want to expand the colonies to a reasonably large size. And we kind of want to get a bunch of little colonies started and then let them colonize themselves, not because this strategy is better, but because it looks nicer on the map and it feels a little bit more organic. But yeah, we build a bunch of overseas trade posts in Marian at this point in time as well, and are starting to sink a little bit of money into Marian. Again, not super throttled by money. We do finish the native policy tech, and we choose trade, which decreases trade maintenance, I think, something like this. We have a note that says decrease maintenance. The year is now 1479, and we are getting 1,000 net income with the parliament tax. And I think last time we talked about income, we were making like 300 net, something like that, or 200 net. And so this is post like the upgrade to workshops starting to come through, but not being 100% in. Because of the way that it works, you kind of have to do it piecemeal, because the second you start, you have to do it piecemeal from not pulling your hair out, a UI perspective. Because when you start upgrading all the buildings, it disables all the buildings. And so we start with 1 to 3 stacks of guilds and upgrade them all, because if we upgraded them all simultaneously, we would completely lose all supply of paper in the market. In theory, what you should do is you should upgrade them one at a time in a bunch of locations all at once, because when you do it one at a time, you don't break any of the buildings except the one you're upgrading. We are not psychotic in that manner, so we're doing it in waves. So at this point, we probably have a third to half of them finished, but you can see we are making a ton more money than we were before. The biggest trades that are coming from the Venice market, the Venetian market, just to kind of give a little bit of context, are silver, books, jewelry, and cloth. So the paper itself we're not really exporting, but we're turning it into books and exporting that. The very biggest trades are silver, though, and this is perhaps a good point of emphasis. Having really good RGOs makes you a ton of money throughout the game, and when you have gold and silver, this is a really, really big deal. RGOs and what RGOs you have available to you at game start are a really big deal in terms of who's going to be strongest, and a lot of the very strongest countries are the countries that have the best RGOs. Like, relative to like historic simulation, I think RGO is overrepresented in terms of power level, you know, like countries that just have gold and silver are just going to be punched way above their weight than I think they did historically speaking in terms of having the RGOs available. So I think we have a decent amount of time passing between the last kind of comment and here, but we fight a massive war. We fight the Balkans, kind of all of them. I think Wallachia, Bulgaria, and Serbia, they're all allied. Bosnia is our subject. We have a subject down here. Bulgaria's taken a big chunk of this. I think a lot of this is in Naples at this point in time, but we fight the Balkans and Naples and the Papal States simultaneously, just because we kind of want to push it. And I don't mean simultaneously in one war. I mean we fight 2 wars simultaneously. So we have several different fronts. I think we recruit up a bunch of troops. We lose a bunch of troops. We suffer pretty significant naval losses against the Papal States, just because it's hard to micro the Navy. I think we have actually, I think they were just beating us in some of these naval fights. The Papal States in particular has a ton of money, like a ton of money. They're like one of the richest countries, and it's like all net income, so they don't have a lot of expenses. And so when you look in the ledger, and they have like not the best income, but they have not the best revenue, but net income is just absolutely insane for them. And we go for just the super high antagonism, and just because we kind of felt like it at this point. At the end of this war, we got, or we go for Bulgaria like 100%, or we get 100 antagonism, I think, just with our peace deal in Bulgaria with our notes. And by the end of this, we own 40% of the Balkans. Just to kind of give a little bit of context in terms of not directly owned, but our subjects own it. And we have this big coalition, so we start improving relations with Hungary, the Papal States, and then also with, we form an alliance with Castile. I don't know how we formed an alliance with Castile when we have antagonism, because generally speaking, they don't like forming alliances when they have antagonism, which I think is an awesome mechanic. If you can be the target of a coalition, they will be a little bit leery about forming an alliance with you. But also during this time, our pop stalls out, because a whole bunch of them were dying in war. And this is always interesting to notice, like the pop growth line is flat. This is something that you pay for every war that you fight, and in particular, minimizing losses is preferred to win wars. And so, to some extent, assaulting forts, like, you can definitely do it to get through stuff faster, but then you pay a cost, right? You also, like some wars where you win and you grab territory, if you're net losing pops, or you're losing pops from good locations, then it's going to be a net negative for you. But okay, we start researching some techs, light Lancer. Mainly we just have to go through Lancer, but I thought it was worth mentioning training fields and dry dock. And so this is 7 techs to get into those 3. And then we go for merchant quarters, which, much like we went for a workshop and a workshop for paper and books, this is effectively the workshop for trade stuff, but it's not as valuable because it doesn't scale in the same way that the workshops scale for paper and books. It's just giving you like 50% more out of your merchant building. And so it's nice because it makes everything more slot efficient per building slot, and also per max building level. You can push more capacity. But as you push more capacity for trades, it has diminishing returns on the trades. So the trade value goes down. So I don't think it's anywhere near as big a power spike, despite us being like a trading nation, as our kind of books/paper was. We tolerate Moroccan, Neapolitan, Median, and Piedmontese, so we start tolerating a lot of cultures. I think some of those are in here. Morocco's, of course, in Morocco. I think this is Mediano. I think this is maybe the one we tolerated here, Neapolitan, and Piedmontese is over here. So this doesn't give us accepted pops, so it's not going to give us cores. But if I recall correctly, the mechanics, you culture convert tolerated cultures better. I'm not 100% sure with this, so don't quote me on it. Hungary leaves and the coalition disbands. I think it restarts a little bit later. This is kind of a weird mechanical thing, which I think in theory gives you spots where you can declare into the coalition when it disbands, and it reforms like a couple days later or something like this. If you declare right in the middle of there, then I think you could just kind of get in there. And then we go on a massive building spree. And to provide a bit of context with how much we spend, is we spend 16k worth of gold, and England wins the 100 Years' War in the year 1484. And I think they win the war maybe through this bug where if there is a revolt in France and the revolt annexes the first France, England automatically wins. But also England was wrecking France anyways. I'm not sure if it was the bug that forced them to win or if they won one, but I don't think they had a PU over France, so I think it might have been the bug, but France was on the ropes anyways. At this point in time, in terms of directly we own, because we have been annexing these little guys in Italy, kind of in the background. We haven't annexed Milan or Genoa, but I think virtually everything else we have. We own 102 out of 224 locations required to form Italy. We're still annexing Milan and Genoa to go. In Crete, and this is maybe providing a little bit of context with how things go. So Crete is a little bit south of here. I don't know what Tinto map Crete is in, but in Crete we have 51 proximity in the portion of Crete that is kind of on the left-hand side. And so, okay. we expand in Aragon, or in Castile up in here, where we are going to push down here. So I guess Aragon was still around. They had just been pushed in by Tunis, and we push them in too by taking the coastline here for Catalonia. And so we have, after this point in time, the coalition kind of ramps back up. And in particular, like every German state that's north of us in here, is going to be a part of the coalition, and so they are a little bit harder to get out, but we were really proactive about getting countries like Hungary out, and so I do think that this is maybe an important note, is if you have a lot of Diplo, you can keep the really big guys out of your coalitions if you're really proactive about improving relations with them. And also, your antagonism, I think, decreases faster if you have good relations, and so this is another reason to play like these small bally expands, is you can maintain good relations and stave off the coalition for longer with a smart expenditure of diplomacy or Diplo in a proactive way by improving relations, especially with the big guys. Because if we get decked on by a bunch of German miners, it's really not going to matter very much for us at all. We have a little bit of a roundup kind of in this 1487 period, because I thought we were going to end this episode here, but I think we're going to push on a little bit further and do a bit more. But in terms of what we have going on, in Anatolia, we own about 60% of the coastline here, which is mostly what we're going for. We own or have subjugated around 80% of Italy. We have in the colonies, we have 4 North American colonies, 3 Cuban colonies. We have another one kind of in the middle here. We have 1 in South America, and we have 4.97 million pops total. Marion, which is our colony here, has 46,000 pops. We contributed about 10k pops ourselves to their formation here, and I think another 10k here. So at this point, it's still going to be mostly our investment, considering 9k are also slaves from the beer done market that we had set up for ourselves earlier on, again, coming in from here to support it. 9k slaves in Marion. We have a 4 trade capacity there and 2.5 average trade value, but also Marion's going to have more trade capacity there, going to have around double ours, and is going to be, or a little bit less than double, because part of our trade capacity is coming from them. We get 1/3 of their trade capacity, but also we have some of these overseas buildings that are doing it. Beer done, which is going to be the market over here, we have 23 trade capacity and 3 per average trade. Also in Marion, the tax base is 29, but we are getting 3 for average trades. Really, there's a lot of super juicy trades. I think the subject we have here, I forget the name of them, but they do have more trade advantage than us, so they are getting priority on the trades, and so they are making a ton of money from trading gold back to Europe. In Venice, we have 374 trade capacity and are getting 1.25 average gold per trade. In Genoa, we have 321 and are getting a similar amount of income from trade. We have 2.6k total income and 755 net, and 42,000 in our bank at this point in time. We, just to kind of frame things out, Coke Timur is getting 750 in income. That's not net, that's just total income. So our net income exceeds the next biggest person, who is Coke Timur, which is going to be someone who's relatively big in China right now. Maybe you've heard of him. And then also we are getting, in terms of our breakdown, 200 from minting, 1,294 from tax, 829 from trade. By the way, if we were using increased trade, we would be getting something to the tune of 1,500 net, but okay. We are getting 343 from Diplo. Of that, 60 is in war reps. We have 23% crown power, 25% tax efficiency, which is a very important modifier. Our manpower max is around 41,000. Our sailors max is 24,000. Our army that is currently standing, remember we are kind of just idling it in a lot of cases, just like letting it, actually no, we've been fighting. Our army is around 35k, and we have minus 55, down from minus 75, vassals versus overlord combined strength. Okay, so we decide to push on and do a little bit more of the recording of the run, because I think that we are going to only go another like 15 to 20 years of the run, so we don't have enough time for a third episode, I think. So we had thought that we were going to make this 3 episodes, but we're just going to continue with what we have remaining here. And so kind of just as introing ideas going into this like intermission period, or following this intermission period, we have the note that we have a ton of antagonism, which we do. We're really close to unifying Italy. We have a loud motorcycle outside. And the current tax base is 3.3k, and the income is 787. And the 787 figure is going to ramp up very, very quickly in the next 20, 30 years. We are, generally speaking, kind of keeping an eye on the colonies. In particular, Marion really pops off during this period. And they are using Dev Province, which is really, really nice to see. And I think this makes it, in theory, nice to have smaller colonies, but also with 3 colonies, with 1 colony, if all of this was 1 colony, they would be able to fight us for trade advantage much better. But if they're a bunch of little colonies, then it's a lot easier for you to have trade advantage there. And I think that trade advantage is really important for securing the value out of your colonies, because you push the RGOs, they're mostly RGOs, they have an unbalanced market. In their market, the price of RGOs collapses. The only thing they can do is export the RGOs. Almost all the value goes to the person controlling the trade of the export. So acquiring more trade advantage then is pretty critical. And it's probably the case that you want just 1 province colonies. And this drives me crazy, because I would rather their incentive structure to incentivize bigger colonies, because I think that's thematically cooler. But with 1 province colonies, they are going to be really bad at fighting you over trade advantage, right? And then they're also going to be much more likely to use Dev Province on 100% of their locations. And so I think that this is really valuable for you. And so I do think that that's probably the correct way to colonize, but Marion is doing pretty hot, and maybe to some extent you want someone a little bit big, that way they can manage affairs in the New World. And by manage affairs, I mean plot rebellion. Shout out to America. And so also noticed, we noticed a modifier where colonial heritage gives 0.005 development, which is roughly how much you get when you are at max prosperity. So they are just naturally deving twice as fast here. And so in terms of the timeline, if they are deving twice as fast and they are behind, if they're behind at game start, let's say 20 dev, and it takes them in terms of... We're not going to do the math here, but I think by the end of the game they kind of catch up in dev is the point we were going to make, but we don't really want to do all the math. They are getting an additional 0.005, so per, that's 0.6 a year, or 0.06 a year, so a decade that's 0.6 control, and so a century that's 6 or 6 dev, and so over the course of, they're not going to catch up. It would take like 3 centuries for them to have 20 dev off of that modifier. I guess they kind of catch up in 3 centuries then. 3 to 4 centuries, and there's 3 to 4 centuries towards the end, so they kind of catch up in dev by the end of the game, I suppose, but really kind of limited by, at least in North America, the USA, North America, they're quite limited by the woods and forests and these types of things. We are really low on manpower after that big fight, that really big war, and we unlocked our trading fields tech, which is really nice, or we prioritize it reordered so that we can get it. We get the our share of the world situation, which is the Treaty of Tosedaias, or Tosedaias, but wherever you have it, you can rename that location, and it will rename the treaty. So we made it the Treaty of Tortillas, which was held in South America. We are colonizing kind of just the tip of Brazil there. We don't really get too much done in South America, just that 1 colony. I do want to make a little bit of point about us being low on manpower, because in theory that means like, oh, maybe there's kind of a little bit of struggle there and there's kind of some difficulty, but at this point it's just like a hot knife through butter in terms of like our ability to handle the AI. Large part of that is we could just hire a bunch of mercs if we had to, or raise our levies, or do both, and we haven't done either of that in forever. Our economy is so much bigger. We could also take loans to hire mercs. We can like hire all the mercs, and so just because our manpower is low, it's the resource we would prefer to spend on waging war is low. is what that means. But the resources we have available are nowhere near exhausted. We just haven't been pressed in a way that we have needed to use those resources by the AI here. So just to like be as clear as possible in terms of like the level of struggle or difficulty in terms of what's going on with that. But okay, in 1492, Marian, we notice, starts colonizing, which is really cool. This is not a behavior I've noticed from the AI at any point before in an earlier version, to the best of my recollection. I think this is the first time we've noticed your AI colony expanding, and they do it really aggressively. I think if we have, like, let's see if we have a map mode here. So this is the provinces map mode. We colonize Marian and Magua. By the end of this episode, or like over the next 20 years, they colonize the other 3 here. So that was pretty cool to see. And also maybe informs the strategy to some extent, where you can plop down a colony and then just know that they'll colonize eventually, just in regards to how we were talking about, oh, you make 1 province colonies and move on. It may be the case you make 1 province colonies and then feed them a bunch of gold. Also, from the perspective of, we're maybe spending like 8 ducats on colonization, but each of our colonies we're feeding like 5 gold, and we have like 8 to 10 colonies, so we're effectively paying 50 more or something like this. And part of why they can pop off is us feeding them gold. Although I think Marian specifically is popping off because they have actual gold, and so they're a strong, independent gold eater, and they don't need no ducats of buckets from Venice. And so at this point we have 836 in trade income before merchant quarters, because we are about to get the merchant quarter tech. Around 50% more capacity it gives us, and then also influence and burger trades is going to be the upgrade, but it's not going to be a 50% increase in income, because as we get more trade capacity, the value of all of our trades comes down. In terms of tech, we start pushing for Marcher Lords, which is from the previous age, and we should have researched this forever ago. We realized that marches do not contribute to that negative penalty you get from having all of your subjects really, really powerful in relation to you. And that is some front on which we are getting squeezed. And because we don't have manpower, we can't expand the army to push that modifier down. And maybe we should actually not be fighting with our army at all and only be fighting with mercs and just using our army to maintain the high loyalty. But what will happen is with marches, they have their own independent calc of all marches' strength relative to you. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but the point is they're not counted with the vassals. And so while we cannot annex marches, we can turn a march back into a vassal. And so we are going to want to, especially north of here, there's like Salzburg here, and we are not planning on annexing them anytime soon, or anyone. Bosnia, we're not planning on annexing anytime soon. We also have Vidin, which is like a big blob in here at this point in time. We're not going to annex them anytime soon. So by switching these guys into marches, we would significantly decrease the pressure on our resource here. And so that is a tech. We are also researching Mercury Patio, which doubles the output of gold. Recall, not too long ago, we said the #1 trade we were running out of Venice was trading silver. It doubles the output of your gold and silver in exchange for mercury, and there's like 3 mercury piles, I think, in Italy. Italy might be the most mercury dense place. There's a mercury pile here, there's a mercury pile here, and there's a mercury pile in Where's Waldoville, where we don't know where the mercury pile is, and maybe there isn't a 3rd mercury pile. We're not really sure, or are we? And then we also go for colonial policy in blast furnace. Blast furnace, I feel like, is plus 75% iron, but I think we already talked about getting plus 75% iron, so one of those was incorrect. But there is a tech that gives plus 75% iron. That might be it. For our colonial policy, we go with trade colonies, which gives a minus 25% foreign building costs. Now, if you recall last episode, we have a government reform giving us minus 20%. Our government reform for Merchant Republic gives us minus 50%. The floor which you will pay is 10%, and so we can't push it by the floor. But what this is going to do, this minus 25% foreign build cost, is going to free up a government reform for us. So now we have a law giving us minus cost, and we free up a reform for ourselves. And so this is going to be pretty nice for us. I don't remember what we put in here. It's not readily available, but in 1496 we now have 5 million pops. We have 964 trade income as the first wave of buildings of merchant quarters, the upgraded form of marketplaces, finishes. Important point of emphasis: this doesn't mean that we have an additional 12% trade capacity or 10% trade capacity, the difference between 836 and 964, because it's going to take more trade capacity to increase income because you're pushing down the value of all your trades, but even still, we do push up. Actually, it's closer to 15-20% increased income from these additional trades. But also what's going on here is we talked about earlier how our biggest exports was books and silver. Well, if we're trading a higher volume of those, we might be making less per trade, but we're also pushing the price of books and silver up. So we are also pushing up our tax base. And so the relationship here is like symbiotic, and it extends beyond the numbers when you examine the numbers in isolation. I wish I had recorded what our tax base was in both instances, because it probably goes up as well. We also accept Neapolitan in terms of the culture, and our cultural capacity is now at 3.07 out of 3. In particular, this isn't like this massive amount of pops. Cultures we're accepting ones that are all part of a cultural group. This is a resource that gets really pressured if you expand outside of your culture group. It gets more expensive to accept. Also, if people have a lot of cultural tradition, remember a third of what we're using, we're accepting all these. A third of what we're using is not even accepting Greek pops, it's just tolerating them. So this is a resource that can get really pressured depending on how you play. We're just doing relatively good for it. For the next wave of techs, we have election, which we couldn't even use, so maybe merchant republics just don't use it. So the way that our leaders have been elected is just through a drawing, and so we could be getting really dookie leaders. It seems like it's a random lottery, or it says it's a lottery, and so we thought that by researching the election tech, maybe it would override this and we would have actual elections and it would be somewhat meritocratic or something like this, but it's not. Maybe there's a law that we have that's forcing this, and we should get rid of that. But as it stands, it seems like our leader is just entirely random. We also go for a first strike, cultured ownership, which I think gives us a little bit more culture, and Renaissance court, which I know gives us a little more cultural stuff. In particular, these are all texts from the previous age, so we will research them a little bit faster. Just going back to research them because texts get cheaper if they are from an age previous, but my understanding is that this modifier doesn't scale up as you get more and more ages advanced past them. So a tier 2 tech will have the same discount or an age 2 tech will have the same discount in age 3 and 4, unless they updated this. I did leave a ticket about it. But if they didn't update it, the thing to do is to make sure you research all the age 2 techs you missed but want to research. Make sure you research them in age 3, because you're not going to get a bigger discount in age 4. And if there are age 3 techs you have left on research that you wanted, you can now in age 4 research the age 3 techs, just in terms of maximizing the total number of techs. Although sometimes just being more timely with the tech is more important than just having more raw techs. And so, okay. We switched trade office network, that is the government reform that was giving us a discount on foreign buildings, and we switch it for formalize the weights, scales, and measures. And this seems to be a Republican-only reform, and it is real good. It gives plus 10% tax efficiency, estate enrichment minus 10%, which I'm not really sure how strong that is as a modifier. It's kind of a little bit hard to tell. It is an amount that the estates hold back that cannot be taxed, and because they are not holding it back, this means you get access to more stuff that you can tax. But in theory, I wonder what happens if that goes negative. Does it just make free money? Probably not, but I guess that's worth looking into. We also get a trend towards individualism, all off of that government reform. We make Shigeoa a city. Remember that this is the place in here that we had talked about earlier in the episode, moving extra pops to. We didn't get it up to 50,000 pops, and so it's only now that it gets up to 50,000 pops, so we make it a city. And we're trying really hard to make a line of cities. At a certain point, I do think using a cabinet action to just make sure that we get the line of cities is going to be useful, but also it's useful for pushing control from Venice. we're planning on moving the capital to Naples, so maybe we're not so involved in this, because the capital in Naples, then suddenly a line making this cheaper isn't going to be useful, because we're going to trace through here to get to these locations, and we're going to go through here to get to these locations, and so we're not going to need to pass through this territory, and instead we're wanting like a line to pass through this territory. But okay, in terms of what we have going on in the Treaty of Tortillas, we have a colony south of the Congo now, and we also claim Cape. In particular, we have the western portion of the Treaty of Tortillas, but if we colonize stuff before it gets resolved, or if we claim stuff before it gets resolved, we will be able to get these other colonies. So we have a Cape claim, and we have a little bit of a colony in the Congo. Constantinople, we hit a very important or very interesting breakpoint where Constantinople finally is getting proximity from Venice, and it's getting like 4 proximity, which translates to like 2 point something control, not a whole lot of control, and we kind of lose it and turn it back on depending on what our fleets are doing and this type of thing, but we do get there. And if we had a better fleet for propagating control, remember we're kind of gated by our sailors, we would be able to maybe get 10 to 15 proximity. I'm not sure exactly. I think maybe in theory it's actually better to go through here. Actually, no, this is super rough terrain. There's no way we're going through here. Take a look at these mountains. Yeah, that's not going to happen. But there's maybe a world where we come through here and we can get like 20 proximity or something like this. Really just the northern portion of Anatolia. I think this is the absolute limit that we can like push navally towards without more naval modifiers. And I think we get a little bit more, and maybe we can just barely touch Trebizond, but that's kind of like the outer reaches of, I think, where we can have direct control via naval. I think at a certain point, though, we can spread stuff better with railroads. Maybe even then, it's a little bit tough. And it's also just generally tough in Italy as it stands. A big reason why we want to move the capital down to Naples is like this. The map mode for terrain, where you're never, ever, 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 right, pushing through several mountains thick worth of locations to get control there. So what this means is like this is like a wall for control, and so if we have our capital nudged up against the wall, we're missing out on propagation distance. And so a big part of why we want the capital over here is because that, I think, we'll get more overall like net control over the course of the entire map. I think that in terms of, we have 6.4 ducats on Constantinople as a note. I think that might be the amount of tax base we are marginally getting by virtue of having that proximity there in terms of the note that we had gone for on there. So, earlier we talked about getting a parliament, or how we generally want to build around parliaments. And the reason being, or after a parliament, is because you can roll stuff that gives a huge discount, and we get to develop the interior parliament, which we're going to intentionally fail, because when you succeed in that parliament, you get a progression towards land. We don't want that. When you fail it, you get a progression towards naval. We're already at 100, so that doesn't matter to us. We would intentionally fail it to get naval, though. But what it also gives us is minus 20% discount on buildings. And we have a lot of stuff. Venice themselves have a minus 10% discount. I think Republicans have like a minus 10% discount. I think one of our idea groups gave minus 10%. I think there's just minus 10% in the tree that we've already picked up. So we've got like we're going to go from like minus 40% to minus 60%. Or capital economy is another 20%. Maybe that's what we're thinking of. So effectively, this is going to make buildings like 30 to 50% off for us. And so we go on a massive building spree. Minus 50, it says here, minus 50% to minus 75%. Okay. We have, at the start of this, 87,000 ducats. And we start by overbuilding Constantinople. And Constantinople currently is not at building cap, and we don't have a lot of buildings there. And so what we do is we just slap down max levels of a whole ton of buildings that are going to shove it way over cap, and we'll just never build in Constantinople again. And we do this because we just kind of don't want to have to think about it very much. But we also just build literally everywhere and everything that's even remotely reasonable, because it's going to be so much cheaper for us. And it's also, just in terms of play patterns, a lot more convenient to build in this way. You know, and you don't need to, because generally speaking, you want to be paused when you're building because you're going to push up the prices of all the input goods, and so you want to pick your spots of this type of thing. But we spend 37k worth of stuff building a bunch of buildings that cost like between 8 and like 20. So that's a lot of buildings, right? Actually, we build like universities and stuff like that. Universities in terms of infrastructure are like 200 ducats. The lab cars are outside of our price range. Usually they're around $50,000 entry level, and then some of these ones we hear are like $500,000. But we also spend on the counting houses, which are like 100 ducats normally, or they're like 130. No, they're 100 for us normally. For a lot of other countries, they're 100 that haven't pushed modifiers. But then for us, they're like 80 during this time period. But the entire point is we just build an enormous amount of stuff. We also swap a law during this parliament over to Confederal Union. I forget what we were... I think we were getting a law that gave us centralization, and we made a little bit of a point about centralization as a resource earlier. We were using a law that was giving us 0.1 centralization, and we swapped onto a law that would give us 0.05 decentralization, but minus 5% proximity cost. And so this is what we mean by we had acquired sufficient amount of centralization as a resource that we could afford this swap and still maintain a positive trend towards centralization. So this is pretty nice for us because we get a proximity discount. At this point in time, we have minus 75 vassal versus overlord, and we turn Salzburg up here into a march. And then we're down at minus 72. So we are going to try and march as many people as possible, as frequently as possible. And so we are very pressured on the Diplo. And so because whenever we're annexing someone, we also have to increase loyalists. And so by turning Salzburg into a march, because we're never going to annex them, we free up resources. And so this is going to be something that we do again in a lot of other spots. We have some new techs that we are researching. We get pressuring diplomacy, which decreases war score cost. I do believe this is from diplomatic ideas in the Second Age. We get 10% section accuracy. I forget the name of it. Correct section is a modifier. I don't really know how valuable this modifier. I don't think it's that valuable, but I just wanted to make note of it. In 15% galley power. I think this is again in the Second Age. And then 20% navy initiative. So just picking up more of these stuff from the Second Age. Just making sure that we research every Second Age tech that we want here in the Third Age, so we lock in our discount before starting to research kind of the more middling or lower tier of the tier 3 techs. That way we just maximize total techs in the end. We prioritize the best tier 3 techs, and now we're going back to the tier 2 techs to kind of research all the reasonable ones. We get the expanding the Doge Palace DHE, which gives us 2 Diplo rep and a 25% location crown power, which is kind of nice. And we start running into massive food issues. And the reason we're running into massive food issues is peasants, laborers, and the lower tier pops consume less food. When we built 30,000 ducats worth of stuff, we got a lot of pops upgrading to burgers, and the upgrade to burgers is now pressuring our food. So we have to, and we even expanded a whole lot of food during that period. So now we're a little bit squeezed, and so we do try and manage it with all the things that we've talked about to some extent. And then we now are talking about new research, and see how these researches we're talking about are really flying. We have more research speed. We have the discount. We research New World crops, which increases food output by 10%. So this is going to be nice for us. A tech that gives building costs minus 10%. Falconets. So we're back into the tier 3 tech with all these. Falconets, Lancer, and +1 government reform, which is going to be quite nice. This is all in the military tree, except for the New World crops and build cost. Falconets, Lancer, and Gov Reform, they're all kind of in a chain to each other, so we're researching Falconets and Lancer to get to Gov Reforms, but they're maybe worth knowing. We now have, in 1509, multiple of our colonies are colonizing, and we get, in terms of income, 2.25 thousand when we have Parliament taxes, additional taxes going. We go and we fight Aragon, and we turn them into a march, and then we go and we turn we already had Aragon, we turn them into a march. I think we took land off of Castile and released Aragon, something like this. Or maybe we took the land off Tunisia. I forget exactly how we did this. We also march Bosnia, Sun, which is kind of been kicking around for a while as just a regular subject. We're not going to annex them anytime soon, although we're kind of on our short list of annexation. We mainly just want to actually get Italy. I think Bosnia would be more valuable as an annex, but we turned them into a march, and we also marched Marrakesh. And we actually need to do a little bit of an interesting thing. Marrakesh is down here in order to be able to march them, because you actually have to be really close to the territory for someone to accept becoming a march. So we fight Morocco for one little location, and then we can march them. And then we give the location over to either the subject we have here or to Marrakesh. I forget which. We also march Aviones, and then we also improve Greek opinion. And so that's going to decrease the 0.97 cost for us. I don't remember exactly where Aviones is on the map, so we will kind of gloss over that. In terms of government reform, as we unlock it, we get bank ledgers, which decreases trade costs and also decreases inflation. I think the decrease in inflation lets us up the minting a whole bunch, and I didn't realize this was going to really generate quite a lot of income for us. And minting is kind of a free-ish one, although when you increase minting, this consumes gold and silver, and so you can't trade or use it as an input if you are going to be consuming it. But that was a bit of an interesting thing. That's the reform that we did select for ourselves. But we're kind of cruising through in terms of game speed a little bit here, not really fighting wars because we feel like we kind of have to chill because we're so pressured by the subject loyalty. Like if we grab more subjects, it's actually going to slow us down with getting Italy, because Milan keeps getting disloyal, and we're trying to annex Milan right now, so that is a bit of a struggle for us. So, regarding our values, just to kind of give a benchmark of where we are with all of them, we have been trying to push these values both through events and also through parliaments. We have 74 innovative, we have 84 humanist, we have 78 plutocracy, we have 59 free subjects, we have 90 centralization, we have 100 of both a capital economy and naval, and we have 30 of outward. Outward in general is just really hard to push, same with inward. And inward got massively nerfed. It used to give 5 flat control. Inward used to be just like super clearly better, and now outward's probably better most of the time. Outward does give power projection, allows us to build overseas buildings, so that is quite nice. We have started building more eco in the colonies, which makes sense considering we've kind of exhausted all of our building opportunities at home with that 30k build spree. And this is kind of, we're throttled now by building slots and building capacity and these types of things in locations that would be good for us to build in. And so this is what we mentioned before. This is really how the workshops really unlock you, is by freeing that up. And so we won't get another workshop upgrade until the next age. We did get naval workshops, we did get weapons workshops, and these types of things, but these aren't really high demand goods in the market. We want stuff like tools workshops, and that's not until the next age. Fine cloth, regular cloth, the really, really big industries are going to be in there. But at this point in time, regarding building more in the colonies, we are getting 412 income from just diplomacy. In terms of trade capacity, we have 129 trade capacity in Fez, and again, we are pushing this a lot in Fez. I think we annexed one of the subjects there. We might have lost over a little bit there, but the point is we're pushing trade capacity here because this is, in terms of areas that we can directly control somewhat reasonably and eventually push some amount of proximity towards, North Africa is going to be the place that's closest to the New World. And so eventually I think what we're going to want to do is, right now a lot of our New World trade, or the New World trade of our subjects, is ending up going to Castile and France and stuff like this. By having a lot of trade here in Morocco, in Fez, what we can do is if we get trade advantage in our colonies, what we can do is we can pull trade from there, and we could do stuff like pull the Chile to Morocco, and then from Morocco push it to Venice or something like this. Or we could just pull it directly from Venice. Also, pushing goods to here or to all of the colonies is kind of what we're doing with a big chunk of the trade capacity from Maghreb. And so we are taking the capacity, we're taking a lot of resources here to make building cheaper and a lot easier in the colonies, and we're shipping them to the colonies. And so this is part of our overall strategy, why we have like over-annexed somewhat bad territory for us, just to kind of help with the colonization. Transylvania, somehow they lost their claims. We had for quite some time here had Transylvania as a subject. Transylvania is like right here. They had claims when we released them. We never used them as a lever to deck on Hungary. We could have if we wanted to. But they lost their claims, and so they weren't going to operate as a lever, so we just released them as a subject. Easy peasy. Gained some subject capacity back. The Reformation started sometime around 1512, but we made a note of it in 1515, which is where we are now. And out of the age advances, we have researched 57 out of 113. And so this is providing a little bit of context, just how many ages or how much research you could expect to get. We have another 20% of the age remaining, so assuming we get another 25% text, because we couldn't research age 3 texts just on starting the age because we didn't have the institutions yet. Maybe we get around 70 texts, and then maybe we research another 10 to 15 texts in the next age and go from 70 to like 85. So all in all, like 85 out of 113, maybe the number of texts you get if you're I think we've been playing relatively efficiently, and we had really, really fast access to institutions. Maybe that's an amount that you can expect to be receiving. In terms of tech, we go for one that gives 50% colonial migration, RGO max level, and Carrick. We go for the Carrick before the RGO max level. And we finally, this has actually just been, we haven't really talked about it much, but this is thematically, in terms of while we've been playing, just a major struggle for us. We've been trying for like 30 to 50 years to annex Milan. And we finally finish annexing Milan in 1518. At this point, we have 6.6 million pops. I think at the start here, we had like 1 to 1.5. We now have 6.6k, or 6.6 million. And a lot of this is coming from annexation. Some of it's coming from pop growth. And we go from, in the 70s, from the vassal size negative modifier to minus 53. So now we're sailing. And so we were having a really hard time maintaining 50 loyalty on Milan to be able to annex them. Every time we went to war and we fight one battle, the decrease in the size of our army alone made Milan and the rest of the countries too strong relative to us for us to continue annexing them. So we were kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. We could have done it much cleaner. And so it was like, in terms of accomplishment, annexing Milan actually felt better than this big-ass war that we're about to talk about. I might have recorded a little bit out of order, or I did record a little bit out of order, so if there's a segment me talking about the war, I think I cleaned them all up and I deleted them, but the war happens at the end here. But in terms of where we are, in terms of the Italy annexation, we are now 134 out of 224. I think last time we did this check-in, it was like 105. So, like, we have increased the number of locations we own in Italy by like 30% by virtue of annexing Milan. Milan had more territory than just this, and so then we have this huge declaration on Castile. And we hide the navy for the start of this battle, or the start of this war, but eventually Castile actually just kind of jacks up our navy a little bit. In particular, let's see if we can find it here, where we show this. We park our navy on the Narrows, or we decide to. We have no heavy ships, because we haven't researched Carrick yet when this war starts, and Castile has like 60 or 70 heavy ships, so they actually have a stronger navy, because even though galleys are better in Narrows and inland seas, which all of the Mediterranean is, heavies are just actually better. And the degree to which they're better scales differently throughout the age, but they're just better. They're more expensive, and they pressure you other ways, but heavy ships are just better than galleys, and so we're a bit scared. We hide in the Narrows, where we will get the biggest galley bonus possible, and we park our navy right here. It's also going to be convenient, because it allows us to, move troops up and down, but our thought was, I think we can win enough of these fights in the Narrows that we can end up coming out on top because we have a lot more galleys, we have a lot more boats than them in total. They just have the heavies. Nope, we were wrong. They jacked up our fleet, and so we had to run away and then try and maneuver some armies while avoiding their fleets a little bit here and there, which is rough if they played really intelligently, because heavy ships move faster than galleys as well. And so if you have a cadre of heavy ships, they will catch the galleys. And so this was a little bit of an interesting one, and also the only area kind of like where we struggled, or like where we were just losing militarily, we had to avoid engagement, that we experienced in quite some time. And so I thought maybe it would be interesting to kind of point that out and emphasize it. But this war is massive because it's versus Castile, Papal, Naples, Burgundy, Sicily, Portugal. So in terms of size, it's really big. We have, I think, 4 or 5 really big armies that we just split up, and all of those armies are big enough to handle like the entire enemy army. So we are way bigger and stronger at this point. But we get a subjugation on Macerata, which I don't even know where that is. We take... Oh, no, wait. I do know where this is. This is the last little vestige in Italy. This is this guy, who had managed to consolidate some territory, and is kind of the last little thing. So that was significant for us. We take 57 antagonism worth of stuff against Naples, taking Naples province itself, which is, like, at this point, like, the highest pop like province in like maybe all of Europe or something like this. 450,000 pops worth of pop we took, and this is we already had a section of Naples as well, so I think maybe close to 1 million pops in total in Naples, or maybe close to 2/3 of a million, something like this. We get 31 antagonism worth of 31 worth of antagonism against the Papal States, and completely kick them out of Italy. So they just have holdings over here. Provence is really jacked up. We have them as a subject, but okay. We also, for 21 infamy, march Viennois. We have no intention of annexing them anytime soon, so we turn them into a march, and we can feed them sections. We also, before this, had fought Savoy and kicked them out of Italy as well, and so this is part of the 134, I think, out of 224 that we had. We take a 5 infamy to take Lisboa, so now we have control of this market as well here. And then we take 37 infamy against Sicily. And so we take this province entirety, and I think a couple other locations, setting ourselves up for maybe one war to annex the rest of Sicily, something like this, and maybe one war to annex the Naples. I think those are both close, and we could definitely do it in 2 wars on both of them, but maybe 1 war to annex all of them, and that eliminates the antagonism. So we were trying to set it up so that we could do it all in 1 war and just take their antagonism off the map and take just enough so that 1 war kind of play pattern would be possible. And then we have Castile, which of course the crown jewel of this war, and this war did take a little bit of time, and we took 30 infamy worth of stuff off of Castile. We released Galicia as well, and we took in particular Valencia, which was a market capital at this point. They had taken it from Barcelona, and so they had moved the capital over to Valencia, the trade capital. So we took that for ourselves, and we also took Sevilla for ourselves. We fed the state leading into, or there's a location leading towards Sevilla so that it would be connected by land to Andalusia or to Granada, but we took Sevilla for ourselves. So at this point, we control every single trade capital in all of the Mediterranean, plus Lisboa, while conveniently ignoring Egypt. Now, Egypt would have not been a problem for us at this stage in the game, and it's kind of at this point where I'm feeling like I'm probably a little bit done with the run, because there's not really much competition with the opposition anywhere. It's around 15-20, something around here is when we kind of wrap this up. And this is where we are. And I also like that the big climactic war kind of punctuates this run. But in particular, I didn't get the final numbers on Marian, but I think Marian's like 60 or 70,000 pops now, and they're really developing quite a big economy and this type of thing, which was interesting to watch. And I think that thematically, like, kind of we accomplished what we wanted to do, which was show off a little bit of this play pattern where you know, create a market over here because you can't trade with Niani without it, and also where you kind of maybe sink a bunch of extra value into, Morocco, so that you can push a bunch of resources over to the market, and then you are able to really support something big here. One of the problems with trying to get colonization up and running anywhere else in this age is you lack the trade range to push the stuff that you want over there. And so this is going to be a significant issue for you, because your trade range, unless I'm mistaken, just like radiates from your capital, not markets you control. And so just because we control Maghreb doesn't mean we can trade into here. And so where your or if your capital was Maghreb, you could like trade into here, but we can't trade this far. We can't trade like this far. And the trade winds specifically, you notice these arrows, the trade winds come in here. And so this is like the first stop. And so you can kind of, if you're where England is, you can trade into North America a little bit. But if you're in the Mediterranean, this is going to be the closest. And for a lot of countries, for basically any country that's not England, which they're going to be tracking their range through a different lane than this is the closest location. And so this is the location that you can get the trade in on, and so you can start developing. And so the Caribbean is going to be kind of the foothold, and now we have a really strong foothold, I think, with Marian, and it would be interesting to maybe tag swap and play as Marian from here, and maybe that's something we could do, something like this, because we could just tag swap onto them. I don't think we have the game setting that prevents that. If we do, that would be unfortunate. But I think we're done with Venice here, unless people really want to see us go for something. But I think we could do something like Form Rome, but it'd just be incredibly tedious, and so not all that interested in doing that. Yeah. I think that this is kind of what we did. Maybe we'll take some questions or something in a Q&A in a couple days or something like this. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you got all this way to the end, if you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you wanted to support the channel and you know you're going to buy the game, a really good way to do this is to go onto the official store and use the code generalist in all caps and order from there. It is inconvenient because you get emailed the code rather than just having the game installed on Steam, but we do get 12% of the sale, and no additional cost to you but the inconvenience. So if you wanted to do that to support, you can. There's also other creators who have codes, so if you wanted to support a different creator, you should check and see if they have a code first, something like this. And obviously if you want the devs to get the money, or not the devs themselves, but the company to get the money, don't use anyone's code. But this is something you could do. But other than all that, we are kind of playing around a little bit with a run taking a look at Delhi. Maybe we'll do some content with that. If you guys want to see Delhi, let me know. If you want to see a different country or something like this, let me know. We have kind of some backlog notes on Austria. We could do an Austria AAR, but we're a little bit removed from it at this point. So let me know what you guys want. And other than that, y'all have a good one.